It all started slowly, as all wonderful and awful things do. At first, a few dark spots here and there, especially on the wall facing the street. I also started suffering from a shallow cough, especially at night. But I didn't mind. I was too busy trying to live the American dream. Moving to the U.S. was always my dream. To achieve it, I had to deal with many setbacks. The biggest one was money. Couldn't afford a nice place like I used to see in the movies. I apologize to whoever's reading this. English is not my mother tongue, so to communicate in the U.S., I had to learn it the hard way. I tried pretty hard to learn. I'm still trying. Not only that, but it affects me. The mold, I mean. At first, it took a bite of everything I had. Took a bite of my brain, it seems. The mold took a bite of my journal, the pages, the cover. They also have spots. Black ones, white ones, green ones, pink ones. Then the mold ate everything. My clothes, my documents, my home appliances, what little furniture I had. I'm sleeping on the floor now, wearing the same shirt all day, every day. The damp, cold floor. Fearing that the mold can reach my lungs more easily this way. I hear people coughing. Neighbors. Funny to think that even though Mary Old said the building was full of people, I've never seen anyone. Miss Old. Is she also affected? My thoughts are so confused. I had the idea of writing this journal to keep track of time, to keep my mind from drifting away too far. It worked at first. It isn't working now, though. My mind feels foggy. Let's start again. To save money, I had to deal with trade-offs, so a cheap rent was my top priority. It's only for a little while, I told myself. Soon I'll make it big and move into a nice room in Malibu or Beverly Hills. That's what I kept saying to myself. Anyway, I found this room at a very low price. The building looks as good as it gets for a cheap rental property. Soon as I stepped into the building, I felt dizzy. The air was stale and heavy. It smelled of dampness, of mold. I didn't mind too much at the time. As I said, I was on a budget. Upon seeing me accompanied by the real estate agent, the building manager came. She was a tall woman with a strange face and a disheveled look, probably in her mid-30s. She wore a black t-shirt and yoga pants. Her light brown wavy hair was tied in a messy ponytail, her face contorted in a mixed-up expression of tiredness and malice, the witch stereotype. But she had a nice ass, that was undebatable. Under her eyes, I could also notice black spots. She had a panda look. At the time, I thought she was working too hard. Now I know better. She introduced herself as Mary Oldman. Mary Old. M-O-L-D. If I knew then what I know now. My mind is drifting again now. I'm hungry. I still have food, but I won't dare eat it. I've noticed a few black spots on the bread, in the eggs, even the peanut butter has spots. The water tastes damp. Even the coffee tastes damp. Coffee. Good old dark coffee. Good old mold. I wake up with my face against the journal. My face itches terribly. It took 3 or 4 steps for me to reach the bathroom. I wash my face with water. Still itches. I wash my face with soap and water. I do it twice. My face still itches. I can't stop myself. My fingernails are too long. I forgot to trim them, so now I'm scratching my face. It hurts. It bleeds, but it won't stop itching. Vinegar. I saw it on the internet. Vinegar is good for eliminating mold. I still have some vinegar. 4 more steps and I reach the kitchen. Thank God the bottle is still full. I splash the vinegar all over my face. It feels like fire. Try as hard as I can to avoid crying, but I just can't. Oh God, I cry before everything goes black. I wake up again. I open my eyes, but everything is still dark. Did I go blind? I've heard that mold can leave you blind. Soon I realized that it's just nighttime. I didn't have the time to turn on the lights, and the ceiling is covered by the blackest mold I've ever seen. So dark. Not only the ceiling, but the walls too. Everything is pitch black. My face isn't itching anymore. Thank God for that. Vinegar. Perhaps the vinegar can help me fight the mold, but I've tried that before. I did, and I ended up in bed with a hell of a fever for 3 straight weeks. It was then that I lost my 2 jobs. How long since then? I mean, for how long have I been unemployed? Am I paying my rent? If so, then how? No matter. I have to try. I must try. I grab the bottle of vinegar and splash all of its contents on the living room wall. The mold starts to melt, slowly falling from the wall. For a moment, I think I hear a shriek, as if the mold was some sort of wounded animal. It shrieks and contorts. It must be my imagination. Moist. All of a sudden, the mold is gone. It had left a few scars, a few grayish spots here and there, but overall, it's gone. Couldn't even remember the color of the wall, but now I can see it clear. It's green. I hear a knocking at my door. I also hear voices. Someone is calling me. The voice is familiar. It's her. Old. What time is it now? What is she doing knocking on my door at night? I forgot when the last time I paid the rent was. Is she bringing my eviction notice? No, a person can't be evicted during the night. Or so I think. Old is still knocking. I finally opened up. First, I couldn't even recognize her. Mary Old had her hair loose, falling over her shoulder. Her eyes are bright with light, and I only know they're green as the wall. Her lips are covered in pink gloss. She's fully naked. I've always wanted you, Mary Old whispers before kissing me. Her kiss tastes of cherry. I embrace Mary Old, feeling her breast squeeze against my chest. I lay on the floor with her on top of me and begin to strip my shirt. As soon as I get rid of it, Mary Old and I kiss again. I embrace her even tighter this time. Now I feel her against my bare skin. Wait, am I writing a journal? Now her kisses taste damp. I open my eyes. I'm alone again, lying on the floor in front of the wall, the same one I splashed with vinegar. The bottle's by my side, but I can't smell the vinegar. I can't smell anything. I hear people coughing hard. I hear a thumping sound as if someone had just fallen. It comes from the room above mine. I see small particles falling from my ceiling, like a bunch of ashes, like black snow. I close my eyes. Mold can make you blind, but I can't avoid inhaling it. Feels like being hit by a truck. I hear knocks on my door. I hear an unfamiliar voice calling my name. Mary Old. She's coughing too, so much she can barely speak a full sentence. Now, Mary Old is coughing too much to even speak, and her knocks are weaker, farther between. I wish I could open the door to her, but I feel so dizzy. My body weighs a ton. I can't speak either. Even breathing is almost impossible now. Now there's no knocking, only a thump. Did she fall? I apologize to whoever is reading this. English is not my mother tongue. I I... Everything's dark now. Is Mary old okay? Old. Mold. The following is an anonymous tip that was deposited into the mailbox of the Lincoln Police Station in Lincoln, Nebraska. The ice cream place on the corner of 48th Street and Vine is a front for human trafficking. It used to be called Soft Serves, and still might be, but they could have changed it by now, and I refuse to even drive near it anymore to double check. I wouldn't venture any more north than 30th these days if I could help it. Had to change my primary, but I didn't tell them why. I should also clarify that the company who supplies their products, I think it's called Utterly Fun Milks and Cheeses or Utterly Fun Dairy Co. or something like that. Their logo is a stupid-looking cow wearing sunglasses. May also be in on whatever is going on there. Hell, I'm not sure of anything anymore. For all I know, they might have cleaned house and just jumped ship to some other place by now. Somewhere also in cahoots with Utterly Fun, if I'm right. And you'll write off this tip as nothing but a waste of your precious time. Don't. For the love of God, don't wait around like I did just to write this all down. I would have reported it sooner, but I was afraid of the plucking and didn't figure it out until last week when the radio... I'm getting ahead of myself, but the end of the story is that Soft Serve is trafficking people, maybe even children. About a month ago, which pains me to admit how much time has passed, I went into what was then called Soft Serves for my bi-monthly ice cream run. If you ask my wife, she wouldn't have known about any of these, and what she didn't know wouldn't have killed her. She's always on one of those fad diets off the TV. This wasn't my first time at the place, in fact. My runs went back for quite some time, enough time to get to know the owner and to be recognized for it at least. On the trip before last, which by my high school math was about 6 weeks ago now, the guy behind the counter, a pimply-faced kid that I had seen before, had let it slip that the place would soon be under new management, a small detail that makes all the sense in the world now. At the time, I think I was preoccupied with the double scoop of pistachio and getting home before my wife could make a comment about it, and the comments didn't really register. It was just one of those niceties, you know, like asking about the weather. The conversation went something like this. Hey, I've seen you in here before. Do you know this place is going to be under new management soon? Really? Bert's leaving? Bert's retiring. Geez, 66 already, huh? Yep. And that was the end of it. I got my double scoop of pistachio, dubbed by Bert the post-game pistachio, aka number 47 on the menu. The place was and is sports-themed, and walked out the door. Never a second thought about the whole new management thing. If anything, it was resolved in my mind. Bert was retiring, and good for him. Lord knows I wished it was me. Besides, Bert was always the kind of guy who liked to train the kids and stuff, hence the one with all the acne. He told me once, my first job was scooping ice cream. I suppose I get to be the cool boss I never had. It only made sense that he'd let it go for the next generation or some other Bertism. I guess that's how this all happened, because I forgot that Bert left, because I didn't read the menu and just went through the motions like I always did. Serves me right, I guess. When I went back in about a month, my last ice cream run I'll ever have, just thinking about the stuff makes me sick now, the place was much quieter than usual. All the same junk was still there, all the sports memorabilia and crap on the walls, So the notion that there was a new menu and new ownership didn't even cross my mind. So I ordered my usual, number 47, 2 scoops, which I indicated by flashing the peace sign. The man behind the counter, I do mean man, was anything but the zit-faced teenager I'd run into the last time. He seemed to study me as he called out the number. I'll describe him for you to the best of my memory. If I had to guess, he must have been about 40 or 50, maybe 45, give or take. He was short, somewhat tan, and had dark hair. Could have been either black or brown. He didn't talk much, but his voice was pretty deep, and he had some sort of tattoo on his forearm. I don't recall what it was. I'd say if you had him in a lineup, I could pick him out, but I've no intention of coming forward for my own safety, lest I'm completely wrong about all this. 45? He seemed to clarify. Yeah? He then nodded and looked around at the 3 or so others enjoying their desserts. Then he said, "Sit, I'll get it for you." "Don't you want me to pay?" I asked. "You pay later." I nodded back, but I knew he could see the look of confusion on my face. Never, not never, in the 2 or so years I'd been going to soft serves, did they ever ask me to pay later or to sit down. It was ice cream, not filet mignon. You scoop it and you hand it over. I guess I figured maybe they had to get a fresh tub of pistachio from the back or something. I knew it wasn't a popular flavor, hence it being demoted to number 46 out of a potential 50 on the rotation. I did what the guy said and had a seat. About that time, which was probably about 5:15 if I had to guess, one of the people sitting at the table beside me got up and left, and a new one entered with the rattle of a cowbell tied onto the door. All the while, I could hear a sort of murmuring from the back room, not loud enough to be distinguished for what was actually being said, but a noise nonetheless. Before long, the man came out, took the new person's order, and handed them their cone within 30 seconds. I stood as they walked out the door, the cowbell jingling again. Excuse me, I didn't..." The man waved his hand in front of his face, cutting me off. "Soon," he said, "soon." All I could do was nod back. About 10 minutes went by before both of them finished their ice creams and left, leaving me alone in the place and the short, tan man nowhere to be seen. I considered just leaving, but as soon as I stood, he rounded the back corner and waved for me to approach. I did. "Still waiting," I said, looking behind the counter. He nodded and continued to wave. "Come," he said. "The back there?" He nodded again. I had never seen the back room of an ice cream shop, but it was about what I expected. There's racks of cups and spoons and napkins and stuff, a big freezer, and along the back wall, where I assume the wall rolls up so the dairy trucks can come make deliveries, a dozen or so big boxes. Crates, actually. The first red flag that should have waved in my mind was why they weren't being refrigerated. Hindsight is 20/20, I guess. 46? The man asked over his shoulder, approaching the boxes. Yeah, 2 scoops, I said. The man stopped in his tracks, shooting a fast-paced glance at another guy, who I also didn't recognize. Similar build, slightly taller, thick mustache, and turned on his heels. 2 scoops? I nodded, and my eyes drifted behind him towards the crates. One of them was stenciled with the words, "Utterly Fun." I didn't know how large containers of ice cream were, and I still don't, but their sheer size seemed like overkill for the kind of tubs you usually saw at Baskin-Robbins, and considering they weren't currently being refrigerated meant something else was inside. But what? The man before me said, "Come with me," and marched directly at me. I began to pivot my body back to where I had come from, and he grabbed me by the arm tightly. Later, I'd find bruises, but at the time, I was so consumed by the crates that I didn't even make a sound. I just let him do it. However, before he could spin me completely around, I caught a glimpse of something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. On the opposite side of the crate, previously blocked by the man's body, was a small hole drilled perfectly into the wood, probably by a drill bit. I couldn't see inside, but I didn't need to. Something had moved in there, like one of those shadows being replaced by another. And then, just one of my peripherals as I spun, I saw the finger emerging from within and nearly screamed. What came out instead was more like a choke, a cough at best, and a gasp at worst. The man had heard it. He shot a narrow glance over his shoulder and kept pulling me closer and closer from the front room until we reached it. "Have a nice day," he said, letting me go. I took a breath of the fresh ice cream scented air, far cooler than the atmosphere of the somewhat stuffy back room, and turned to face him. What? I said, "Have a nice day, sir." The "sir" was firm, like a stamp at the end of the letter. Okay, I said, and walked through the door with that cowbell jingling over my head, never once looking back while rubbing down the hairs on my neck. I strutted swiftly to my car, like a man almost late for a meeting, and threw myself inside. The sun was now setting, and whereas I'd always admired the orange yellow of the light, that night the dusk was haunting. I stomped on the brakes, turned the key, and pulled down the shifter into reverse. I immediately began to back up, and then my foot slammed itself down once again as the white dairy truck directly behind my car grew in the rearview mirror. I'd nearly hit it. I honked once politely, waved my hand, then twice aggressively. When the truck didn't move, I rolled down the window and yelled, "Hey, trying to move here," while simultaneously flopping my hands around in the air, which had a sort of chill to it. At first, I thought the thing might have been parked there, but upon second glance, I realized its headlights were still on, and there was someone in the driver's seat. They were looking at me. It was just a shadowy outline of a person, but I knew that they were looking at me. I ducked down and for whatever reason held my breath, as if that might make a difference. The truck honked once, and I knew from the sheer sound and length of it that it wouldn't come twice. I stepped out of my car despite my better judgment, not turning it off, with really no other alternative in mind, perhaps other than to ram the damn thing and speed my ass off. I should have. "Hey, I gotta go, man." The truck rolled forward. It didn't roll far enough to unblock my car, but it rolled far enough so that it was directly facing the driver through the truck's window. With his silhouetted thumb, he pointed towards the back of the thing. I shook my head and repeated, I gotta go," really enunciating each word like I was trying to speak to a deaf person. The driver didn't really seem to care. Instead, he stared at me for a long moment, the two of us frozen in place in that ice cream shop parking lot. I shook my head again, thinking, don't do this, over and over again, hoping that somehow the creep would physically understand me. He didn't, of course. Instead, he bent down and nearly vanished from view. From what I could tell by squinting, he was fishing through some kind of box or something. When his head lifted back up, I could tell, even from the shadows, that something was covering his face. A stray car rolled by on the road behind the truck, and then, when the coast was clear, the truck driver's side door popped open, and the stranger emerged. It hadn't registered to me that the parking lot, its dimly orange lights had flashed on, and as the figure rounded the front of the truck and approached me, they served to reveal him. The man, given his build, was about my height, dressed in some kind of tracksuit and wearing a cow mask. In fact, the mask looked strikingly similar to the logo plastered on the side of the truck, utterly fun, which is a fact that just dawned on me. There were more important things to pay attention to at the time, but The image floated peripherally at the edge of my mind's eye. I stood my ground while curling my toes in my shoes. "Is there a problem?" I asked. The cow-faced man looked blankly at me from the mask's black, dead eyes. Then he spoke in an unfamiliar voice. "We can do this easy or not." "Do what?" Again, he gestured with his thumb, pointing at the back of the truck. "Get in. I promise you'll be brought right back to your vehicle when this is all said and done." I shook my head. Just say you did it now," I barked. "No good. Not here. Get in." I let out a shaky breath and thought about making a run for it, or hopping back into my car and trying Plan B. I did neither, instead trying to keep cool. I agreed and followed the man back to the truck, which was already lifted open. Unfortunately, in my panic, I didn't get the plate number. The back of the truck was a sort of freezer with cardboard boxes stacked on either side. In the middle of these, in what might have been called an aisle, was a single chair. The masked man pointed to it. "Take a seat." I did, after jumping up and into the back of the truck. All the while, I'd completely forgotten that I'd left my car on, until I heard it running, even over the rumble of the truck. "Hey, turn off my..." The engine stopped before I could finish, and the man in the cow mask glanced towards it and raised his head. My keys were thrown into it. "You drive. I'll talk to him," he said, clearly to someone I couldn't see. He then lifted himself into the truck, and as I pushed myself backwards into the chair, with every inch into the thing, the temperature got chiller, and now I knew why he might have been wearing the black tracksuit. Before he slammed the back door of the thing, the final remnants of the sunlight cast their eerie orange glow onto the stacked boxes on my left. From top to bottom, they read Rocky Road, Superman, Vanilla and Chocolate Swirl, Milk, Eggs, and Poultry. To me, it was odd that such an array was combined in the back of the truck, even to the point of cross-contamination. But I guess this is more common than I thought. Each of the boxes stared back at me by virtue of the stupid cow and the stupid sunglasses, grinning his cheesy grin. Then again, I guess that was the idea. Yet, despite how kid-friendly the thing was, its mouth wide open, said nothing but, "Ha ha, you stupid bastard, you're about to get skinned alive. See what you get for eating sweets behind your poor wife's back? You're just desserts. Get it? Just desserts." I don't know what you think I saw, but I didn't see anything. I swear to God, man, I didn't see anything. The truck began to rumble forward, and the cow-faced man in the tracksuit took hold of a nearby shelf railing. Letting gravity finish, the door descended. He stabled himself and then turned to me. "What is it you think I think you saw?" I hesitated. Crates. Just crates, that's it." He nodded behind the cow mask. "Anything else?" I shook my head adamantly. No, nothing. "Nothing in the crates?" "No, what? Ice cream. You think I saw your ice cream? 'Cause I didn't." He nodded once more. "Didn't see a finger? An eyeball?" I choked on my words as the truck hit a bump. Before I could answer, he answered for me. "'Cause I think you did, but I think you're mistaken. There's chickens in those crates. You understand? Chickens. If you saw anything, it was a chicken eye, or a chicken finger, chicken toe, whatever the hell you call it. Chickens couldn't wear red nail polish, you stupid bastard," I thought. God, I hope that was nail polish. I nodded in agreement, though, reading between the lines of what he was saying. Yeah, that's it. That's what I saw. A chicken. It was just a chicken." But even still, we can't have people knowing we keep chickens in crates. The snowflakes would melt over it. Ever heard of cage-free eggs?" That bullshit? I shook my head. No one will ever know. I wouldn't tell a single soul any of it. Any of it. I swear to God. Swear to me. I do. I swear to you. The masked man nodded at me as the truck took a turn. Not good enough, he said. I'm going to need insurance. I nodded, acting agreeable as I could under the circumstances. You want my car? You want my credit card? I want you to shut up, he said, shaking his head. I agreed. He then got down on one knee, as if to propose, and looked directly at me through the mask. I could see his warm breath rising up through the silver of the eye slits in the mask, and then realized that we were sitting, in a giant freezer. My body had gone so numb that I hadn't even noticed. And then I did. The air was ice cold, making it only harder to breathe. Do you know about chicken farms? I took in a gasping breath and shook my head. You know about how they process them, right? How they lop their heads off and scald them, that kind of thing. I nodded again. Well, they do all that before they pluck them. Plucking them alive's worse. I agreed, thinking, the hell's this got to do with me? Boy, if I only knew. I'd like to show you, he said. Show me? I thought. Show me what? Show me... Wait, where the hell is this truck taking me anyway? Then I realized I hadn't replied. Show me? What? Chickens? Yeah. What do you think's in those boxes? He guffawed and kicking the one reading poultry. Not these, though, he said, eyeing the one stacked on top. Here, he pried the top one open, just enough to reach out and pull out a pint of Rocky Road. Have some. I'm not hungry. Have it anyway. I did. 2 spoonless mouthfuls into the Rocky Road, which, if I even so much as smell anymore, will result in gagging. The truck began to slow. I could feel its tires squealing beneath me. The man in the cow mask stood up straight and cleared his throat. Now, I'm about to do something to you, but don't freak out, okay? My heart stopped. Okay. I'm gonna put a bag over your head. I'm not gonna put it on tight. I'm just doing it for privacy. Got it? I nodded, trying not to tear up. Got it? The man approached me just as the truck stopped. He pulled from perhaps his back pocket a black sack of sorts. Before long, it was over my face, smelling of mildew, rust, and general ass. Can you see anything? No, I lied, being able to see my feet if I looked straight down. I could also make out the moonlight pouring into the back of the truck as the door slid up, simultaneously filling it with warm air. Thank God for that warm air. I'm going to take you by the hand, and we're going to go for a walk, all right? I sniffed through the mask, burning and salt tears smelling into my eyes as the reality of the situation hit me like a ton of bricks. Please don't kill me. Please. I'm not going to kill you. Yet. Please, God, please, I don't want to die. He got really close to me, practically touching the bag with his nose, and I could taste his sour breath. Keep it up, and you'll find out that there are fates worse than death. Much worse. I sucked back some snot and tried to control my breathing. He then started to pull my hand, but I didn't budge. Aggressively, he pulled again. I have a wife. You do anything to me, and she'll know right away. She's probably already worried sick. The man went silent for a moment. Then he said, You have a wife. For now. I swear to God, if you lay a finger on her, I thought, but didn't say. It was big talk for a man with a bag over his head. Instead, I simply muttered, She has nothing to do with this. As long as you don't tell her. I won't, I said, and then felt the man tug at me again. 46. What? 46, I repeated. What the hell is number 46? I heard him sigh. Not for sale anymore. At least, not for you. It's some kind of secret password, then. Some kind of code. Damn it, of all the stupid stuff to be, it just had to be the same number as my post-game pistachio, didn't it? Some secret, that is. Loosening my footing, I let him drag me to God knew where, which, based on what I heard and smelled, was probably exactly where we'd discussed. A chicken farm. Perhaps a poultry processing plant or something. There's some a ways away from Lincoln, but in the time it took for the truck to reach it, soft serve, I find the rural option highly unlikely. My best guess is that it was a small plant, perhaps. Small private farm, maybe? Like I said, though, I'm not sure of anything anymore. What I am sure of is that rusty smell inside the mask was even stronger as we approached whatever was in front of us. I suppose it might have been genuine rust, especially if the rest of the place was as dingy as the room that he took me to. But it also could have been that metallic, coppery flavor of blood. Even if it wasn't, the sounds of buzzing and balking meant that bloodshed wasn't far away. I watched my own feet shuffle behind the man until we reached a small room where the ground appeared to be as putrid as it smelled. I heard the sound of a metal door slamming shut, and then felt two hands on my shoulder shoving me into a seat. I took it, and then the bag came off. Now, some places pluck their birds by hand, the man said, still muffled by the cow mask. Some have a machine. We do a bit of both, I guess you could say. I heard my heart thumping in my chest as I looked around. The room was small and dimly lit. Felt like I had just dropped my pants on the crapper of a fast food joint. One of the kinds you got to eat in your car, and it didn't smell much different. There were streaks of something, which could have been blood, along the ground, and even some going up the wall. It was a dank place, rancid and dark. Sounds echoed from beyond the room, but I didn't pay much attention to them as the man spoke. When we stopped, though, one was clearer, closer than all the others. In fact, it sounded as if we were in the next room over, only separated by the stained metal walls to my left. Initially, it sounded a bit like the truck with that rumbling kind of noise, but this was deeper, louder, more metallic. Sounded like a chainsaw grinding on concrete or a car compactor chewing up a glass-bottomed boat. The man behind the mask watched as I winced at the sound coming from behind the wall. I went to cover my ears, but his flattened hands stopped me as if telling me to stay. Wait for it, he said. Wait for it. All at once, the machine-like noises whirred even higher, and a shrill scream shot through the wall. At first, it sounded like an animal, but animals can't yell out for God by name. This was a man screaming like an animal. I gasped as I tried to catch my breath. What the hell is that? The wailing on the other side of the wall continued as the mechanical noises grinded right along. The plucking, the cowman said. Plucking, I thought. Plucking what? Humans didn't have feathers. What was being plucked? You know, some people got waterboarded down in Guantanamo Bay, the man continued. Said it was unbearable, and they're supposed to be following the Geneva Convention down there. Outside of that, though, should have been crushed, castrated, skinned, hell, even Christ was crucified. but nothing quite as bad as the plucking. The shrill screams continued, and the walls began to rattle. After an agonizing moment of listening on in pale horror, the voice cut off in favor of a loud, yet disguised, guitar riff. One quite familiar, in fact. It was a Blondie, one way or another, coming through what sounded like a crappy radio speaker. Despite enjoying much of Blondie's music, especially Call Me, which was a song my wife and I used to sing quite frequently during our karaoke days, I could no longer listen to Deborah Harry's voice without trembling and an awful sour feeling bubbling in my stomach. Same can be said for the taste or even the smell of ice cream, especially pistachio. Now that I could no longer hear the screaming, despite knowing that whatever was going on to the poor bastard next door was still going on, I focused on mouthing my next words. What's going on over there? Plucking, the man said. Then he reached into his tracksuit pocket and rummaged around for something. I could tell that he found it when his arms stopped twitching. It was a photograph, printed out on an old piece of Polaroid paper. Trust me, you don't want the details, but this should paint a picture. I've done my best to forget what was printed on that piece of paper. Suffice it to say that most of the image was red. I could make out what might have been a person at some point or another. There was a head, 2 arms, 2 legs. Everything else was just red. It was something you might have seen in a horror movie or on one of those sicko websites where people pay top dollar for other people's misery. I only got a quick glance, though, before I started vomiting onto the floor. "That'll be you," the man said as I reached, waving the picture above me. "That'll be you if you say one word about any of this. Got it?" I nodded, still gagging. Who was that, I thought, trying to shove the image out of my mind. Then a terrible idea came to me. Bert. What if Bert didn't retire? What if he... "Say it," the man gruffed. "I got it. I got it," I yelled. "Good," he said, and pocketed the picture. Blondie kept playing from the other side of the wall as the grinding and twisting noise continued in my ears, giving me a massive migraine that I still feel like I haven't shaken. You'll never see me again," I pleaded, trying to stop crying and shaking and gagging all at once. You'll never see me again. You'll never hear from me ever again. I'll never step foot in your store ever again. I didn't see anything. I swear I didn't. Not even your face. And I promise, I don't even remember what the other guy looked like anyway." "Which guy?" "The one who took my order," I cried. "Oh," the masked man said with a chuckle. "Who do you think's being plucked right now?" My stomach sank. Then the bag was shoved over my head again. What followed is a blur to me still, but much of it was more of the same. Except instead of the truck taking me to my car from the processing plant, we went from the plant back to my car, which was still parked in the lot of soft served, now empty. I'd been sweating so profusely that the freezing truck quite literally made my skin icy, and other than the fact that the masked man spoke very little, the drive back was more or less the same as the drive there. When the back door of the thing finally lifted open after what felt like hours, and the outside air hit me, I huffed it up like a drug, maybe for no other reason than the fact that it didn't smell like ice cream or blood. I wanted to cry, but I kept my composure as the man watched me jump to the concrete and gather myself. "Remember what we talked about," he said. I nodded. I do. Good. Because if we hear one word that you said anything to anybody. I know, the plucking. He nodded once, then hopped back into the truck. I stood in silence as the engine rumbled into acceleration and rolled from the parking lot, leaving me alone to bask in the orange-tinted light from above. For what must have been a good 10 minutes, I just stood there, unable to move, trembling. My car keys were clutched tightly in one hand, and the other was wrapped around my wrist. Finally, I sighed and began to sob. All this, for pistachio ice cream. In the weeks that followed, leading up to this long-winded tip, and I do thank you for reading it up to this point as I try to recall all the gory details that transpired. I was a nervous wreck. My wife could clearly tell, even as early as that evening as I slid into bed beside her. "You're home late?" "Mm-hmm." She turned over under the covers, which I was on top of. "Long day?" Then I guess she must have seen something on my face. "Baby, what's wrong?" Nothing. Just tired." At that moment, I wanted to cry again. I had never lied so bluntly to my wife before. "You look like you could use a hot shower," she said, then sniffed me. "What's that smell?" Just go to bed, babe. I'll shower in the morning." And even though I did, the smell never left my nose. In fact, for the last 4 weeks, I've smelled nothing but metal, be it rust or blood or whatever the hell it is. It's like tasting my own mucus when you're sick. Just worse, and it won't go away. Still hasn't, despite my revelation, which I'll get to. Every now and again since, while watching a movie with my wife, and by watching, I mean staring off into space while holding her closer than I ever had before, I'd hear the faint sound of an ice cream truck come rumbling by with its signature high-pitched tune. I think it's the same melody as It's a Small World, you know, from the Disney World, only I'd fill in with my own lyrics. "If you start to cry, then you're out of luck. 'Cause if she finds out, then you will be plucked." "Bit late for ice cream, isn't it?" she asked. I tightened my arm around her as I got cold all over, despite now being under the covers. Yeah, weird." Suddenly a new song popped into my head, one that made my stomach churn and my temples pulse. The Blondie one. "I'll drive past your house, and if the lights are all down, I'll see who's around." Is that what this is? Intimidation? Boy, did I think so, especially if those neighborhood ice cream trucks sold utterly fun products, which they probably did. They were stalking me, harassing me. No ice cream truck ran at 7 o'clock. Or do they? No, this is just a sick way of keeping tabs on me, making sure I don't squeal, I thought. 'Cause God knows if I do. Then what? I didn't even know what the plucking was in the first place. Only that it sounded painful, and that was an understatement. It was torture. Nothing short of it. But humans don't have feathers, I thought, so what's to pluck? Then an even darker thought seized me as my wife watched a movie in ignorant bliss. "Your eyes out, stupid. They'll pluck your eyes out, your teeth out, your fingers off, every hair on your stupid head. Maybe they'll pluck your skin from your muscles and your muscles from your bones, or scald you just for fun. No feathers required. Maybe your entrails will be plucked from your body, or maybe they'll pluck you from your cozy little house, from your cozy little wife. Don't lie to yourself. There's plenty of ways to be plucked." Suddenly, the image of a memory popped into my head. A childhood toy, actually. Mr. Potato Head with no eyes, no nose, no teeth. After that, my stomach was in knots. I didn't eat dinner, baked chicken, go figure, and I couldn't go to sleep. At best, my head was on the pillow and my eyes were closed. But it was easier to keep them open, at least until the spinning ceiling fan started looking a bit too much like a saw blade. Then I closed them again, and I was back in that rusty room until morning, where I'd have to stomach watching my wife pluck her fingers from her lips after every bite of bacon. The revelation came about a week ago, and thank God for it. Thank God, yes. I've sat on my hands ever since, just in case I'm wrong, but something tells me I'm not. My wife tells me I'm not. Yeah, she knows now. On my way home from work last Thursday, carefully avoiding any streets north of 30 at all cost, and listening to whatever crap was playing on the radio, the song for The Tide is High came on. A song by Blondie. It was like an unexpected punch in the gut, and immediately I switched the station to some stupid furniture store commercial. No credit, no problem. No money down, 0% APR. Big selection, yeah. Big savings, yeah. And then the ad abruptly cut off to one of those, you're listening to LCWR radio, the tune, or whatever. I guess someone down at the furniture emporium cheaped out on the last 3 seconds of airtime. Then suddenly a light bulb went off in my brain. The voice cut off. It cut off just like that. Just like the screaming did when the Blondie song started to play. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was just a recording or something, like a tape or a CD. Maybe there is no plucking. And even though I didn't believe it, that thought gave me such a relief that I nearly got into a wreck trying to focus on the road. I nearly burst a blood vessel tightening my grip on the wheel. Think about it, stupid. Why didn't they just kill you? Because they don't kill anybody. Because it's just another liability for them. Because it would draw more attention than their real business. And did the screaming even sound like the so-called guy from the ice cream store? Could he have been the one driving the stupid truck in the first place? But what if I'm wrong? What if it was all wishful thinking and the plucking was real and not just a heavy dose of psychological warfare? And if I'm wrong about it, the consequences are beyond severe. Far beyond. Think about that Polaroid picture, I said to myself. Could have been chicken guts, I replied. That night I saw a light at the end of the long tunnel. It gave me hope. Even still, the ice cream truck made its round the next day, serenading the entire neighborhood with It's a Small World. It drove especially slow down the cul-de-sac where I live. Or was that how slow it always drove? I mean, it's got to be pretty slow for the kids, right? And how'd they even know where I live? License plate's stupid. They know your license plate number. And if they've got the number, then they've got your name. And if they've got your name, but maybe it wasn't them. Maybe it was just the ice cream truck. And if the ice cream truck thing was all in my head, maybe the plucking was all in my head too. So I Googled it. The plucking. The only results I got were some kind of economic theory, a guitar tutorial, and a cosmetic hair removal video. Oh shit, I thought in a cold sweat while reading that last one. Maybe it was some sort of long drawn-out scalping method, or maybe it was not real, stupid. Not a single result about torture, is there? Maybe it was a new method. Maybe it's really underground, or maybe it's not real. Despite that nagging voice at the back of my mind for the rest of the day, I decided to come clean and tell my wife that I'd been sneaking out to get ice cream without her knowledge. She laughed at first, but as I kept going, telling her everything, her smile faded into panic and terror, into expressions I didn't even know she could make. You're putting her in danger, I thought. There is no danger. How do they even know what I'm telling her? Nobody's bugged our house. When I explained the whole radio thing, my revelation, she was hesitant at first to believe. But as we kept talking, the whole anonymous tip thing came up, and it seemed like a careful solution in case I was wrong. Unless I was very wrong. It was her idea, and it was a good one. So if this tip thing helps, and we pray it does, thank her. We've since taken necessary precautions, too. I bought a gun. Won't describe what kind for purchase history tracing purposes, but believe me, it'll do the job. And I keep it under my bed. I also upgraded my home security system thanks to ADT and put a vague word in with the neighborhood watch about those ice cream trucks, just in case. I also got my hands on a phone book and have started sifting through the Berts. You'd think for as long as I've known the guy that I'd know his cell number or his last name, but you'd be wrong. The final precaution was this tip, our brave boys in blue. So thank you, Anonymous. Following the reception of this anonymous tip, the Lincoln Police Department began an investigation into both Soft Serves LLC and the utterly fun Dairy and Poultry Company, since the anonymous whistleblower has not come forward yet. My name is Eric Panic. I was on the Tanner City High School cheer team. I was the last of my friends to get their driver's license, only because of how busy I was at the North Shore Animal Shelter. I have a 3.6 GPA, only because of how much I struggled in history and social studies. All my friends mooched off me in chemistry and math. I live with my mom, Rebecca Panic, though I'm moving to college soon so I can get as far away from this town as I can. My escape routes are plenty because of my good grades, and my teachers wrote thoughtful notes and recommendations, but I feel undeserving of it. I never have before, but maybe it was watching what happened in my own school, in Tanner City High, that makes me feel somewhat guilty for being able to take advantage of my opportunities. Chad still has his scholarship, but he certainly can't enlist in the Marines like he wanted to. I'm not sure how he and Becky will carry on. They've been dating since the 8th grade, so we hold out hope, but we've both changed so much. Becky says I'm the lucky one, that I still have my pretty face, but I hate that she said that, and I hate that I know everybody else thinks so too. We'll never go to the North Shore Mall again and laugh at how depressed the Easter Bunny looks, or go around smelling all the candles and lotion at the Bath and Body Works, while the boys boy about in the Lego store. Becky doesn't have a nose anymore, and Chad doesn't have any fingers anymore. Her smelling career's done, and his Lego building career's done, unless he wants to use his feet. I always felt bad for Elliot Tate, not because he was a chimpanzee, but because everybody treated him differently, because he was a chimpanzee. And that's exactly why I ended up taking Elliot Tate to senior prom in 2019. I wanted to be nice, give the kid a chance. I thought maybe he'd take to our friend group. Girls, people, listen, please. Do not take anybody to the prom out of pity. Please, I beg you. You got a good heart, Erica, my mother would say to me, and that's what she said to me the Saturday morning I told her that I was going to ask Elliot to go to the senior prom with me. We were eating bowls of Honey Nut Cheerios in the kitchen while sunset came in. I just know you and this boy will make such a nice couple at the dance. What's he like? I don't know, I said, 3 Cheerios floating in the milk on my spoon. He doesn't talk much. He really doesn't have any friends. Is he special needs? I don't think so. There's never a para or an extra teacher around him. I think he just doesn't know how to make friends. Is he cute? I pictured his big grayish pink ears, protruding mouth, big brown eyes, and sloped shoulders. Well, he's shorter than me, I said. I had math class with Elliot, but he always sat in the back of class, never participating. I knew he had very messy handwriting. Do you remember Aunt Petunia? Of course I do. Your great aunt. I'm surprised you remember her. Why do you bring her up? Well, Elliot can only communicate through ASL, I said. My mother lifted her brow. Oh, really? Yes, but I just don't always know what he's saying. I'll look over my shoulder and see him signing. Of course, Mr. Johnson doesn't know sign language, so he probably just thinks he's playing with his fingers. Anyway, I was wondering if you still have that binder for all the signs. I think it's under my bed. I abandoned my bowl of Cheerios and milk and hurried upstairs into the cozier room of the house. Big windows, curtains, white as icing on a cake, and my mother's yellow satin sheets. I rummaged around the floor for a little while before finding the old ASL binder, which had the basics of sign language. My mother used to think it was cute to bring me to see old Aunt Petunia, a woman who had to learn sign language because she smoked her own voice box out of her throat. I had some basic hand signs swishing around somewhere in my memory, but it had been almost 12 years since Aunt Petunia died. That had been an ironically quiet funeral. I was 7 then, and only cried because she had lost her voice before she had lost her life. I spent that Saturday practicing. First, I practiced how to sign, "Will you go to prom with me?" Then I continued with, "Do you like math?" or "What are your hobbies?" I practiced, "Will you go to prom with me?" in the bathroom mirror. My fingers flicked effortlessly and my thumb moved like a gymnast, ducking and tucking. The next day, my mom and I went out dress shopping, where I got a blue dress that was going to pair with a pink headband. I had the idea of doing a beehive behind the headband for prom, going for a 60s look. And that Monday at school, while people were coming into Mr. Johnson's classroom, I sat in the desk next to Elliot and signed, "Will you go to prom with me?" He froze with shock, very enunciated on his chimpanzee face. If he had a voice, then he would have been speechless. I think I smirked at his shock. He nodded very frantically and rapidly signed back, "Yes, I will go to prom with you, Erica." I had to guess he signed my name because, truthfully, I didn't find Erica in the ASL binder. Knowing he knew how to hear English, he just couldn't speak it. I giggled out loud. "You sign better than a human." His excitement dwindled, and I worried that I'd hit a nerve. "I'm sorry," I said, eyes darting around in search of something to patch up my mistake with. "I thought you were cute, so I wanted to ask." His ears twitched up, his eyes sparkled, and though he smelled like a barnyard, he was very cute then. Anything that is happy is cute, and I made him happy. "What color dress will you wear?" he signed, so I signed back blue. He nodded and signed, "I want my mom to take me shopping for a tie." "What color?" I asked. "Yellow," he signed. I looked down at his homework. His writing was very messy, but at least he knew how to spell his name. "Tangents are hard, aren't they?" I suggested, to which he nodded. I continued speaking. "So-co-ta sounds like a sorority, doesn't it?" He nodded again and did a little hoot to let me know that he found the remark amusing. Then he turned solemnly and signed, "I thought no one would ask someone like me." "Someone like you?" I asked, to which he nodded, and to which I asked, "What do you mean, someone like you?" He signed, "A chimpanzee. I'm not tall like," and then he pointed to Stephen, the cutest guy in Mr. Johnson's class. I looked back at Elliot and gave him a little chortle. "Oh, Elliot, that stuff doesn't matter." "But I'm not popular," he signed. "I'm ugly. No girls talk to me." "Well, I'm talking to you, aren't I?" He stopped. Maybe he had something to say, but just not the sign language to say it. Then he signed, "I didn't want to make friends. Your friends are not like me." "Well, sure they can be, Elliot. You just got to get to know them." "Why do you say that?" "They do sports and have girlfriends." I didn't really know what to say to that, but I knew hesitating was too delicate a thing to show in these kinds of conversations. So I signed, "Girlfriends aren't all that." This thoroughly amused him, and he bobbed his head in a nod so triumphant that he shook his desk. "You just need friends first," I signed, my sign language being slower than his. Something stubborn within him crept into his eyes and kept them from sparkling, even though there was so much black sea where sparkles couldn't take place. Mr. Johnson came, and I left to sit in my own desk, fluttering my fingers behind me to wave goodbye to Elliot. "Are you really taking Elliot to prom?" Becky scolded while we were getting ready for cheer practice. We were in our white and blue skirts with the school letters on the cheeks because our coach insisted he got better at face painting one another after the next basketball game. "I thought you'd be taking Stephen," McKella blurted out. "I see how you two look at each other. especially after he scores a goal and is all full of himself afterwards. It's get a basket, Michaela, Becky scolded. I already talked it over with Steven, I said while tying my shoe. He's okay with it. Besides, Elliot wouldn't mind if Steven and I sneak in a dance. Why are you even going with him? Another girl asked. Because who else is going to take him? He's lonely. Everybody deserves to go to prom, I said. He's so weird, Becky whispered. I don't want to be near him at prom. Michaela started snickering to herself. What if I got Will to spike his punch? Don't do that, I exasperated, now tying my other shoe. Girls, just be nice, okay? He'll understand when we go and stand by with my friends. I talked with him. He's actually very nice. You talked with him? Becky gasped. Yeah, using sign language, I said. Michaela butted in. Oh my God, you guys, I need to know. Lilac or magenta? Our coach called for us, and all conversations were abandoned as we went into a robotic cheerleader mode. The next day, I sat next to Elliot before all the rest of our classmates came into Mr. Johnson's room. I'm excited, he signed. Oh yeah, me too, Elliot. I hope you think I'm a nice guy, a proper gentleman, he signed. You already are, I smiled. Quit being so shy. See, you can hold a conversation. You're a natural. But not everybody understands ASL, he signed. I'll be your translator at prom. Again, his eyes did that thing where all the stars went out, black sea. No more sparkling. Was this because he was astonished, surprised, relieved? His wide mouth made an O shape, which made me smile, because I actually did find him rather cute. Okay, Mom, I called from the bathroom after checking the volume of my hair. I was satisfied that my headband showed just enough to make it seem as though I had a pink halo on my head. I'm gonna get going. Let me see you, my mother called back as I exited the bathroom and went downstairs, picking up the hem of my blue dress so I wouldn't fall. She stood between the bottom step and the front door and covered her mouth. She was looking at me the way people look at a rocket before it goes into space. Honey, she mused, slowly lowering her hands, you look beautiful. I gave an obliging smile. Is Elliot going to come pick you up? No, he doesn't drive. I'm going to pick him up, I said, finally landing in the foyer where she kissed my cheek. Please take a lot of pictures for me tonight. I will, Mom, and I kissed her goodbye, going outside to my car and driving away. Elliot and I got to the school while it was getting dark out. I see you got your yellow tie, I said, putting the car in park and turning off the ignition. He'd gotten the yellow tie. In fact, it was all he was wearing. He signed, Yes, my mom took me to get it. Well, I think you look very handsome, Elliot. I remained patient while he signed, You look very beautiful. Oh, Elliot, you're so sweet. Are you ready? He nodded. We entered the gymnasium together, walking into the blue light, which gave the gymnasium the illusion of being under the sea. Parts of girls' dresses glimmered, while Old Spice made the air smell radioactive. We stopped so I could scan the room in search of the girls. I saw them at the punch bowl, so Elliot and I walked over to them. I could tell Becky was about to gush over my appearance, but then she saw my date. Her voice was flat. Hi, Elliot. He waved, having to look up at her because he was only 4 feet. Hey, you look cute, buddy, one of the girls said. Killer tie, man, another boy said, and I was glad to hear that they sounded genuine. Do you want some punch, Elliot? Another boy asked, and I was gladder to hear the sincerity in his offer. Elliot nodded, then looked up at me. Oh, no punch for me yet, I said, while they got Elliot a cup of punch. So, Elliot, how did you bag this baddie? One of the boys asked, to which Elliot signed in reply. I looked down at him, only partially catching what he signed, but I knew what he was saying, so I translated. Oh, I asked him. Yeah, Elliot, one of the boys cheered. Elliot was quite humble, or he really just didn't know how to react. I didn't have time enough to find it quite odd that the first thing his peers would ever congratulate him on was getting a woman to go out with him. Have you ever danced, Elliot? I asked, to which he shook his head. I started leading him out onto the floor, where the lights were much bluer and brighter, and where the Old Spice radiation was more intense. I don't remember what song was on, but Elliot's attempt at dancing had to have been the cutest and funniest thing in the world. He swirled in place and made a snarl that suggested a cackle, though no noise came out. He was having fun, and I was glad to be with him. I mimicked the ladies' dance moves in Pulp Fiction. We returned to my cheerleader friends and their dates after a couple of songs. The boys told him they liked his dance moves, and he nodded, making that cackling snarl. I could tell that expression off-put some of my cheerleader friends. He moved his fingers, and I was glad I was the only one who knew sign language. I thought you all wouldn't like me, was what he had signed. What's he saying? One of the boys asked mid-laugh. My teeth hesitated atop one another. He wasn't sure you guys would like him. Elliot, one of the boys complained. His fingers moved away, reminding us just how long and thick each finger was. You're just pretending. What's he saying, Erica? Becky asked. Chad popped up and kissed Becky on the cheek. Typical Becky, she looked annoyed, but didn't protest her boyfriend's way of saying hello. Hey, Erica, Steven's looking for you, Chad said. Oh, hey, what's up, Elijah? His name is Elliot, Becky said, and I could tell she was trying hard not to roll her eyes. Erica, Steven called, while pushing through the people on the floor. He came to a halt and let out a breathless wow while looking me up and down. Erica, you look good too, Steven, I said on the verge of giggles. Chad stood behind Becky and locked his arms around her wrist. At this, I saw that annoyance dwindle in her eye. I looked down and saw Elliot sign. He's not going to steal you from me, is he? What's he saying? Steven asked. Nothing. Hey guys, Elliot and I are gonna go over there and have a word. That all right? I asked, already preparing to shepherd Elliot off. We know you know what he said, Michaela said. Really, it's just harder to understand because it's dark in here, I lied. But if you hold enough kittens at the North Shore Animal Shelter, you eventually become inept at committing petty sins like lying. Elliot was tugging on my arm, but I was looking at my friends. I glanced down and saw him sign, Mine, you're my date, mine, not his. He was pointing at Steven at that last part. He started pulling me away. Steven stepped forward going, Yo, you okay with this, Erica? Yeah, I'm fine. We just need to talk, I said over my shoulder. We reached the other side, the less crowded side of the gymnasium. Elliot, what's wrong? He was signing. I don't want you to talk or dance with other boys. I understand, but you do know Steven and I have liked each other for some time. Why did you take me then? He signed. Because I thought you deserved to come with someone. When do we... He signed, and then signed something that made my stomach drop. My mouth fell open, and I wanted to step away, but I was just too shocked. He looked up at me, expecting not a yes or a no answer, but a win. I'm just going to spend the rest of the night with Steven. Elliot started rocking in place and shaking his head. His big pink ears flapped while his head shaking grew more rapid. I released my voice. Elliot! He started hooting and hopping across the gymnasium. How quickly my schoolmates dispersed. Steven barely had time to turn around when Elliot became airborne, spreading his long, way too long arms and landing on top of him. The music was still playing while my friends screamed, and Elliot let out a maniac chimpanzee laugh. He was latched onto Steven like one of those giant hairy masks. Steven spun around. Everybody screamed, but I stayed still and watched how Steven spurted blood, purple, from under the deep-sea lights. Elliot squealed with some kind of demented delight after blinding Steven. Elliot hopped off, turning until facing Steven again. They were separating long enough for me to see the purple wishing wells that were now Steven's eyes. The poor boy had his face lifted up, as though that would give him back his sight. His mouth was open, screaming, but Elliot took the opportunity like some kind of mid-combat Jason Bourne and reached his long fingers up to hook the fingers into Steven's mouth. In synchronization with a cracking noise, Elliot ripped off Steven's jawbone, the whole jawbone, and started twirling around with it. There was a substantial amount of blood purpling on the gymnasium floor. Becky had slipped on it. Chad went to help her until Steven's jawbone ricocheted off his forehead. It stunned him long enough for Elliot to move to his next victim. Crunch. He bit Chad's fingers off on one hand, then bit the other ones off too, pushing him down and trampling on him like a trampoline. Stephen was balled up, crying and bleeding. Becky was screaming while watching her boyfriend being turned into a bouncy house. Except the bouncy house wasn't full of twigs and on someone's lawn. It was on the hard gym floor, full of bones, and shattering more and more of them as he went. And Elliot was having a ball. It really was a night to remember. I remember the rest of it in flashes. Becky's nose being bitten off, and seeing the 2 fresh slits where her nostrils were. How different that made her eyes look. I remembered the popping sound of Elliot dislocating, then tugging on Stephen's arm, hooting and squealing and screaming. Blood, so purple and dark. I could smell the rusty smell of it. Elliot worked and worked on Stephen's shoulder. He was insistent on seeing to it that Stephen was going to be an amputee. "Erica," Becky wheezed. She had never sounded clearer before. "You have to understand, I wish I had run too. I wish I had the wherewithal to be dispersed as well and gotten the hell out of that gymnasium. But I was entranced. I couldn't look away. It was horrible. I watched my friends and crush being torn apart. No, not apart, being bitten apart. "Erica!" Becky reached for me, crawling towards me on the thin surface of blood. That's when the police came in and shot Elliot. He caught the first few bullets on the back and chest, starting to hobble over to the police officers, but they emptied their pistols into him, about 2 or 3 of the shots opening his head. Music was still playing, but Becky was still reaching for me and wheezing my name while Stephen coughed to no avail. You wouldn't be surprised to hear that I followed the investigation immensely. What else was I going to do while I couldn't sleep? I also went down a rabbit hole of documented chimpanzee attacks on humans, and one in particular caught my attention. The St. James Davis chimpanzee attack in 2005. At an animal sanctuary, a man and his wife brought a birthday cake to Mo the chimpanzee, a chimp who used to live with them before being sent to the enclosure. St. James and his wife were eating the birthday cake with Mo when 2 other chimpanzees got out of their cages. The theory is that the other 2 chimps were jealous because Mo was getting cake and they weren't. One of the chimps came and bit off the wife's thumb before St. James heroically hid his wife underneath the table and absorbed the brunt of the chimp's envy. They did irrevocable damage to him. He went on to live his life forever disfigured and without certain extremities, all because 2 chimps were jealous that they didn't get any cake. Envy and self-entitlement drove these things to commit such heinous acts. I hope you understand the prejudice I've developed for this kind of animal, a hatred for them, and somehow a hatred for myself. I wish I could say I've stuck by Stephen, but my heart just simply isn't that good. It's not like my mother thought. It's not that I'm going around dating anyone. No, I'm not going to date for a long time. I don't even want to meet someone or something as sick and twisted and entitled as Elliot Tate. Her sickness appeared inescapable as it demolished her health. My mother's weakness seemed to exacerbate the illness. The discomforting fact about her sickness was that the doctors had no ability to determine what was causing it. Slowly and gradually each day, her body began to deteriorate. First her nails began to snap, then her hair began to fall out in clumps, and now her skin was peeling uncontrollably. It was as if she were being slipped chemo pills. By this time, our house no longer felt like a home. It was transformed into a hospital. First, she had 1 caretaker, then 2, and now we have 5 in the house. IV bags are strung about her room, and medical supplies are scattered around the house. My mother's bed had become the only place she spends her days. In fact, I haven't seen her leave the bed in nearly a week. An inescapable sense of fear slowly invaded my family's emotions. My days were spent entirely thinking about my mother and attempting to research what her possible illness could be. I usually spent much of my time on the internet, researching things. I had a natural thirst for knowledge, and in this case, I decided to research everything I could on the internet. However, I had little luck in discovering possible diseases that she may have. I would have spent the entire night on the computer, but something drew my attention elsewhere. As I worked on the computer, my peripherals detected something outside. I shifted my gaze to the window and scanned the area in search of abnormalities. I swiftly recognized an obscure figure standing by a tree in the woods with a lanky, bony, dark figure. There was little light escaping the reaches of our home, but the minuscule amount that did just barely illuminated the area around the figure. Whatever it was, it stood motionless, just intently staring at our home. I felt rather unsafe and rolled open the window. "Hey," I exclaimed. However, there was no response. The scrawny figure just remained static, looking directly at me. I felt quite uncomfortable. It was as if he had some agenda or plan and was standing there just waiting for me to sleep so he may execute his plan. Though it was a tough battle, I finally managed to discover rest that night. The next morning I awoke in surprise after a terrifying dream. The rusted springs in my mattress violently creaked. The dust jumped from the covers as I shot up from bed. It was almost as if I had been suffocated by my covers. I fought through the mess in my bed to the window. After a look outside, there was no longer any sight of the abstract figure. I was filled with relief as my nightmares had been swiftly proven false. The previous evening I dreamed of this abstract figure entering our home. While in the home, he was in my mother's room, whispering what sounded nothing far from gibberish. I was eager to discover what I had imagined was invalid. The next day didn't differ from the recent schedule. Being the summer, I spent the majority of my time outside. I ran through the woods, exploring and venturing my way through the tall oaks. Before I arrived back at home, I noticed a peculiar sight. On the ground laid several strands of hair. This looked somewhat odd, but as I kept rummaging through the leaves, I noticed things only grew increasingly peculiar. Next to the hair lay several teeth. I also found what looked like human flesh. It appeared as if the skin on someone's hand had been peeled from the bone and muscle. Looking similar to a glove, the piece of flesh lay on the ground next to the other body parts. I returned home, filled with curiosity. I decided the best way for me to indulge in this interest was to research it. I looked up random body parts in the woods and did not discover much. I continued searching, but like my mother's illness, I found little explanation. However, this would quickly change. I remembered the disturbing tall figure standing outside my house. I decided it couldn't hurt to look it up. The results I found were quite unsettling. If what I found on the internet was the same sight I had noticed outside my house, my family and I were in big trouble. As I read through the articles, it stated the man was a demonic presence, attempting to take a human form. Through several failed attempts, it may shed flesh or other body parts. It explained these were mere rejections of the natural human body, as it recognized its demon form. They called this creature the abstract man. By this time I felt disheartened, as I soon realized the height of the situation. This entity was trying to take possession of my mother. Sure enough, as I stood from the computer, I gazed out the window and was greeted by now the unnerving sight of the abstract man. He stood there, almost as if he knew my newly acquired knowledge. He stared directly at me, now closer than before. His gaze remained unbroken as his face was locked on me. I couldn't make out any human in his face, and he had no eyes, nose, or mouth. The scraggly form was totally devoid of color or definition. Now feeling disturbed, I remained in bed the entire night, worried for when the abstract man would strike. I got up every hour to continuously check on his presence. At 2 a.m. he was closer. At 3 a.m. he crept closer still. At 4 a.m. he was at an unnervingly close distance. At this time I decided I should alert my parents. I woke them and told them of the man standing outside our home. My father gripped his shotgun and began to walk outside. My mother laid in bed in deep sleep. As my father pounded the door open, we both were greeted with a surprising sight. Outside, our lawn remained empty of any presence or entity. I felt embarrassed. I thought maybe I was just seeing things. The following day, my father and mother left for the hospital. Unfortunately, her illness only grew worse. I reserved my beliefs on her sickness due to the fact that little would trust such a ridiculous premise. I sat on my computer, attempting to search more on the abstract man, and discovered more that filled me with an unsettling feeling. I discovered this figure tried to destroy any information on itself quickly after taking the form of the host. When my mother came home from the hospital, I was pleasantly surprised. She appeared to have fully recovered. She walked around the kitchen. Overcome with joy, I rushed to hug her. I thought after the disappearance of the abstract man that she would easily be able to return to a healthy state. As I returned to my room, I received a telephone call. When I picked up the phone, my heart sank. Eerily over the phone, I heard a familiar voice speak. Sounding rather weak, my mother spoke. "Son, I love you. No matter what happens, I love you." She sounded as if she were fighting for her life. I tried to respond, but was unable to, as it peered over my shoulder. Standing there, I saw whatever this thing was that now resembled my mother. When it opened its mouth, I heard a sound revoltingly unlike my mother's. It uttered shrieks and stood staring at me, flourishing with hatred. I looked to the door and tried to dart away. This being chased with inhuman speed and forced me to halt. It snarled in a nasty voice, but I gripped a nearby kitchen knife. It grabbed my other arm and steadily spread its gaping mouth towards my flesh. It was unsuccessful in biting my limb as I jutted the blade into the creature's neck. It fell to the ground, gurgling on its own blood. It shrieked and struggled on the ground. This disgusting conjunction of flesh changed its voice to my mother's. It screamed, "Help me, son, help." I looked back at the being, unable to be tricked by it. It pulled the knife from its throat and crawled away on all fours. I would have attempted to stop it, but it was much too quick for me. As it sped away, it made a horrible, croaking noise. It ran, still in the form of my mother. That day, my mother died. I guess there was only enough room for one of her on the planet, and this creature now occupied that spot. The abstract man takes the form of many, and still roams this world as my mother. I have no clue of his whereabouts, but, as I said, he'll do whatever it takes to destroy information about him anywhere. As a caution to those who read this, I would recommend you check outside your window every night. He knows you know. He will, at all costs, track you down and rid the knowledge of him. If you ever look out your window and you see that tall, standing, dark figure, you must pack your bags, throw them in the car, and get the hell out of wherever you live. If you're lucky, you will have evaded him. If you aren't, well, be ready to give up your body. Everybody knows that if you surf the web long enough, you'll see some pretty sick stuff. This is especially true if you intentionally dive into the dark underbelly of the internet. I've seen quite a few things I don't care to admit to, but one thing I'll always remember is a site called normalpornfornormalpeople.com. The first strange thing about the site was that I didn't find it by actually looking for it. It was emailed to me by someone I didn't know. The email was as follows: "Hi there. Found this site is very nice. Thought you might like it. Normal porn for normal people. Pass it on for the good of mankind." Pretty standard issue chain letter, although the URL and the last remark really piqued my curiosity. I was having a very boring day when I got this, so I made sure my antivirus was working and clicked on it. It was a very average, very generic looking site. It gave the impression that the creators just barely gave a crap about making it look professional. The author seemed to have a very tenuous grasp on English, and on the first page was a long, boring, and incoherent rant that I don't remember or have saved. The site had a strange tagline, which even today, people haven't figured out the meaning of. Normal porn for normal people, a website dedicated to the eradication of abnormal sexuality. And from the sound of that, I wasn't sure whether I was here to watch porn or if I'd stumbled on some kind of eugenics program. But I was here now, and I was very, very curious to see what normal people got their rocks off to. So, I scrolled through the rant, and nothing. The page didn't seem to link to anywhere else, and I was about to leave when I noticed that every word of the rant was its own hyperlink. I clicked one of them and was sent to a white page with a very long list of links in the form of normalpornfornormalpeople.com/random letters. So, I stopped for a minute and asked myself if I really wanted to waste God knows how much time clicking random links that would likely give me a virus and would certainly fry my computer. I figured I'd try it for maybe 5 minutes, just to see if anything came up. I clicked one of the links, which sent me to another page. This page apparently had totally different URLs than the last one. I was about to say screw this when I clicked on the third link and a video download came up. It was called peanut.avi, a 30-minute video of a man, a woman, and a dog in a kitchen. The woman made a peanut butter sandwich, and the man set it down for the dog to eat. This was all that happened for 30 minutes. It was obvious that the cameraman had stopped filming and waited until the dog was ready to eat again, and the dog seemed rather sick by the end of it. I know what you're thinking. What the hell does that have to do with porn? I have no clue. I've seen a little over a dozen videos on the site, and the majority had no sexual activity at all. After watching Peanut AVI, I went on a certain image board I frequented to play online show and tell, which I always do with weird stuff like this. But someone had already made a thread about it, a guy who'd received the same chain letter I did. The image board thread had a lot of people with nothing better to do than dig through the site, and that's how I saw the other videos. Most of those 24 videos were very uneventful and consisted of people talking to the cameraman in a room with nothing in it but a desk and a few chairs. I mean, literally nothing on the walls or in terms of furniture. The whole room had a very cold, sterile feel to it. The conversations were idle banter about previous jobs or embarrassing childhood moments. I kept expecting some kind of discussion about what the people were filming or what the site was about, but of course, there was nothing. You would never know these videos had anything to do with porn if you saw them out of context. I will say one thing, though. The people who appeared in these videos were quite attractive. However, the other videos actually did feature content I suppose could be called sexual, is where things got weird. I'll give brief descriptions of the stranger videos. You know, if you're really eaten up with curiosity, you can try to hunt them down on a torrent site. LickedClean.avi, a 10-minute video filmed by a hidden camera, in which we see a repairman working on a washing machine for the first 2 minutes. When it's fixed, the repairman talks to the owner briefly and then leaves. The owner checks to make sure the repairman is gone, then begins to lick all over the top of the washing machine. This goes on for 7 minutes. Jimbo.avi, a 5-minute video of an obese mime performing his act. It was actually pretty funny, particularly one part where he pretended to pull up a chair, then pretended that it breaks because of his weight. In the last 30 seconds of the video, the camera cuts to static briefly and cuts back to the man sobbing quietly, still wearing a mime outfit and makeup. Some kind of obscure fetish, maybe. Diana.avi, 4-minute video in which the cameraman talks to a woman in a room different from the interview room. This room looks like one you'd find in a normal person's house. Exactly where they are is never specified, as Diana only talks about her violin playing. She obviously plays her violin, but keeps getting distracted by something. I didn't notice this until someone brought it up on the image board, but if you look at the mirror in the background, you can see a fat man in a chicken mask, pleasuring himself. Jessica AVI, another 4-minute cameraman video. This time he's outside a house talking to another young woman. They talk about canoe rides. The camera zooms out to reveal the city street behind them occasionally. The strange thing is that no one so far has been able to identify where the street is. Guesses have ranged everywhere from Europe to Australia to the Philippines, but there's yet to be a match for the street shown in the video. Tongue-tied AVI, 10-minute video. The first 5 minutes consists of an elderly woman making out with a mannequin. The video cuts out like it did in Jimbo AVI halfway through, and the scene is then a group of mannequins huddled together in a circle around the camera. The lights have been dimmed and the elderly woman is nowhere to be seen. From this point on, there's no sound. Stumps. 5-minute long video where a man with no legs is attempting to breakdance on a DDR mat in what looks like the kitchen from Peanut AVI, but much dirtier. There's a radio playing music unseen in the background, but it stops at the 4-minute mark when the man collapses on the mat in exhaustion. He breathes heavily and pleads with someone off screen to let him rest. This off-screen person becomes terrifyingly enraged and yells at him to keep dancing, which he does. You can hear this off-screen person beginning to scream as the video ends abruptly. Privacy.avi. The woman from Diana AVI is performing on a mattress in the interview room, while the man from Stumps AVI walks around on his hands, wearing some kind of goblin mask. The door in this room was always closed in the other videos, but it's now open. In this video, the only light is in the room, and the hallway is dark. Near the end of the video, you can see an animal quickly run through the hallway. And finally, the last one we uncovered. Useless.avi. In this 18-minute video, a blonde woman from one of the previous interview videos is tied down to a mattress in the interview room. She attempts to scream, but her mouth is taped over. After 7 minutes, a man in a black suit and a mask opens the door, but he doesn't enter. He holds the door open for the animal that was running in the hall in the previous video. It's revealed to be an adult chimpanzee, its hair shaved and its entire body painted red. When the chimp enters the room, the masked man closes the door behind it. The chimpanzee sniffs the air for a minute. It may have been blind, and notices the woman tied on the mattress. It goes into a frenzy and begins to maul her. The assault goes on for a grueling 7 minutes until the woman finally dies. The chimp eats flesh from her corpse for 4 minutes as the video ends. The thread exploded with activity after the video was uncovered, and people discussed it long into the night. When I came back to the image board the next day, I found that it had been deleted. I tried to start another one, and they banned me. I tried emailing the guy who sent me the chain letter to the site URL. I sent him 5 messages and never got a response. I've tried to discuss the website on various places and have been banned frequently. The site itself was also deleted about 3 days after useless AVI was uncovered, likely because someone contacted the authorities about it. The only proof that normal porn for normal people ever existed was a few screen caps people took, and videos from the site that people saved and uploaded on torrents, the most popular of which was useless AVI, which found its way onto a couple of gore sites. Wherever you uploaded them to, all the videos from normalpornfornormalpeople.com get deleted after a while. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what I've pieced together, the episode's product number is 7G06, and the title was Dead Bart. The episode labeled 7G06, Moaning Lisa, was made later, and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. It was written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet, seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present around Matt at the time resulted in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt himself. I just heard of it at the event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early. In addition to getting angry, asking anyone who was on the show about Dead Bart would cause them to do everything they could to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk with him alone as he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I had followed him. He probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessed fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all the color drained from his face, and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser and came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text. A link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the download was complete, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I'd ever seen. System restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer, as I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other, but had very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for some enchanted evening, it was similar but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer was angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa behaved anxiously, and Bart appeared to have genuine anger and hatred towards his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window and was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of The Simpsons would represent life, and that death made things more realistic. Hence why it was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of not having to move, and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with a shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at the table, crying. The crying went on and on. It became more pained and realistic, better acting than you would have thought possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring, looking like deformed shadows with random bright colors thrown on them. There were faces in the window, flashing in and out, so you could never really be sure what you were looking at. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a little card saying that 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge, and Lisa were skeletally thin, still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted as they walked to the cemetery. The houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was lying in front of the tombstone, looking like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually, they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to the summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw, so you can't tell what he's saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them. Some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that hadn't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates as well. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson or George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpsons family on their couch, like in the intro, but all drawn in the super hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurs to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the deaths of living Simpsons guest stars, but there was something odd about most of the ones that hadn't died yet. All their deaths are listed as the same date. Update. Well, I had to get rid of that computer I watched the episode on. Even after a complete reformatting, it never worked correctly. I couldn't delete the episode file, and it kept opening on its own. I wiped the hard drive clean several times, but it wouldn't go away. The sound control didn't work either. It was a laptop, but the power never seemed to run out, and I couldn't get it to turn off. I was going to keep the computer just so I'd have a copy of the lost episode, but looking at it was making me nervous. I had a reoccurring nightmare several nights in a row. The episode was playing, but instead of the photorealistic Bart corpse, it was myself at 10 years old. I found a picture of myself at 10, and the nightmare was closer to it than my own memory had been. I swear that picture of myself at 10, dead, started flashing on my computer screen so quickly that I could never be sure. After that, I destroyed the computer. I haven't been able to get the episode out of my head, though, and decided to do more research to try to understand it. I found a few people online who seemed to know about it. Apparently, it aired once in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. I have a cousin who lived around there, and he was watching The Simpsons during the first season, so I asked if he remembered the episode. He asked me how I knew about it. It was a nightmare that he'd had, and he'd only told his parents about. And I was just a few years old at the time. I told him about the episode I saw and the people online who remembered it. He thought I was playing a prank on him, and when I got up to look at the online post about it, he screamed and hung up. He hasn't responded to any attempts I made to contact him since. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I kept searching online. I found someone who said they had a tape of it that they would sell me. I was nervous, but determined to find out the truth about this and get to the bottom of it. I bought the tape, as well as a really old, cheap TV VCR, since I had a feeling neither would be the same after I watched the episode. The episode was pretty much the same as the file I downloaded. I don't want to say any more. This wasn't worth it, and I'd give anything to go back to how I felt when I had the computer with the file scaring me. I destroyed the tape, but it didn't help. The commercials on it, I don't want to remember them. There were monsters from my dreams I had never told anybody about. New promos about tragedies that hadn't happened yet. Surreal computer-generated animation that wouldn't have been possible in the 80s, or now, for that matter. A former friend watched it with me, but he saw completely different things, with one exception. There was a seemingly live news report from June 6, 2013. In complete monotone, he'd recited the details of millions of people dying in their sleep, some of them waking up for a few seconds first, rambling incoherently about something that people could only piece together that had something to do with nightmares. I'm sure you can figure out what date was on the tombstones of the currently alive celebrities at the end of the episode. There was one more difference, too. The joke Homer told was completely clear in this version. When it zoomed in on Homer's face while looking at Bart, he said, "If only we were all so lucky." Two days ago, I was out for a walk around my neighborhood. It was the ideal kind of summer day. Bright sun overhead, wispy white clouds streaking across the sky, and a gentle breeze to keep my body from overheating. I even took the time to lean down and touch grass as I passed a lawn that was about 5 centuries late for a mowing, only to swiftly yank my hand back as a stray cat leapt out with a hiss. I stumbled off the sidewalk in surprise, landing on my butt in the middle of the road, hot pavement scorching my exposed calves. Ack! I scrambled to get my skin off the asphalt, its noxious, heated smell burrowing into my nostrils. What was that? While I was standing up, I checked the ground to make sure that nothing had fallen out of my shorts. Overheated cell phone, wallet with about $5 in it for soda, house keys with about 1,000,000 obnoxious little danglers, and I saw that my little circle of a shadow hid nothing from me. But my attention was quickly captivated by that voice, and as my gaze drifted across the road, I noticed something strange. A shadow, conical in shape, lengthy, faint compared to mine, sat at my feet. Following the shade to its origin, I found a girl, no more than a year or two younger than myself, probably, standing in the middle of the street holding a flashlight. She had long dark brown hair that was messy with strands poking out in all directions, and green eyes, wide and erratic. Her left hand was pulled in tight, clutching the collar of her shirt with a terrible fervor, and in her right hand was a flashlight, violently shaking from her trembling. A flashlight, turned off, being pointed frantically all around in front of her in the middle of broad daylight. "Miss?" I called out, concern starting to climb into my voice. "Ah!" the girl screamed with an intensity that curdled my blood. The flashlight was aimed directly in my direction, and I found myself taking a step back, as though she were going to attack me with it. But watching her gaze, we never made eye contact, not even once. It was as though she couldn't even see me, despite standing only about 6 feet away from her. "Who's there?" Her feet shuffled across the pavement, taking step after dotted step as though she were afraid that taking another big step would make the road collapse beneath her. The thought that she might have been blind was first in line, but a stronger, more suspicious idea took over. No one in their right mind, and sober, would be standing in the middle of the street at noon waving a flashlight around like a lunatic. Current working theories became she was either crazy or on drugs. Regardless, I couldn't just stand around and let this random woman get hit by a car, so I cleared my throat, which put her head on a swivel again, and attempted to initiate conversation. "Ma'am, are you all right? Do you need any help?" Who are you? Show yourself!" Now the flashlight stayed in my general direction, but she was still looking downwards more than forwards. Puzzled, I tried to follow her eyes, but all I saw was the extended cone shadow, now curving outward towards me. Licking my chapped lips, I swallowed and opened my mouth again. "What's with the flashlight? You feeling okay?" The girl's eyes finally seemed to meet mine, but only for a fleeting second. Still, that was long enough to tell. She was terrified, as though her life were in danger. Technically it was, as long as she continued to stand there in the street. She pulled the flashlight arm in closer, and the shadow on the ground moved with it. "What do you mean?" A sound, revving, rolling over pavement, cutting wind, faster than it should have been in this neighborhood. She heard it too. Her breathing quickened, and the girl started to run, flailing as she passed me by and crossing on a diagonal to the other side of the road, where a muscle car, beyond any price range I could imagine, flew over the hill and sped towards her. "Stop!" I shouted, directed hopelessly at both the girl and the car. She did not look behind. She turned on her heels very quickly and started to lose her balance. The car didn't slow. I pushed off the road with all my might and reached out, my fingers hastily wrapped around her forearm, where I could feel the texture of goosebumps along the entirety of it, and yanked hard. The car rushed past us both, but in the very instant of it all, I felt as though everything had gone into slow motion. We were close enough to getting hit that my skin absorbed the heat from the car. I felt the rear-view mirror so gently graze my arm hair, made eye contact with the sunglass-wearing tool at the wheel, who was watching us with shock as we melted into fleshy blurs, before it all barreled down the street and drifted around a corner. We were both alive. "Ah!" Her cries of fear loosened my own grip out of fright, and I received a hard smack on the forearm from the metal light source. I'd started backing away as she swung the flashlight again, clenching my teeth as I held the sure-to-be bruised arm in my opposite hand. "Get off me! Get off me! Get off me!" "Chill out. You nearly got hit. You nearly got both of us hit by a car," I groaned, wincing as pain reverberated from my arm where she had struck me. When I looked back up at her, her eyes were definitely staring in my direction, but she still wasn't looking at me. More like through me, still unable to notice my presence. Nonetheless, my words seemed to calm her, if only a bit, and she looked as though she had something to say. "We're on a road?" I looked around for a hidden camera, expecting to be punked. When no one popped out of the tall grass, I turned back to her and sighed, throwing my arms upward for a moment. Yeah, we're standing in the middle of the road right now. Are you, legit blind? Not trying to be insulting, genuinely asking." I'm not blind, but how can you see? What? The girl stood up straight, her eyes now focused squarely on my chest. Will you come a little closer? Are you going to hit me with that flashlight again? Just please, I can't see you. Please come out where I can see you. By this point, I was utterly confused. With the sun beaming down on my neck, I took a step forward. Slowly, slowly. I get scared easily. Another sigh escaped my lips. I halved my usual walking distance, moving less than a foot per step. 8, 7, 6. When the toes of my shoes finally entered the conical shadow, I saw her visibly tense up for a moment. A terrible idea had started to weave itself in my brain, but the threads were too thin for me to consider it in any serious sense. I, the very definition of slow, stepped forward and fully stood in the faint shadow. Again, the girl jumped for a moment as I approached, but she was quick to calm and soon let out a deep breath. I was worried you were some kind of... I don't know. Just glad you're human. Seriously? How long have you been outside today? I was beginning to get frustrated. Only a few minutes. Here. She looked down, covering her mouth with her free hand, shoulders shaking as she tried not to cry. When she stood up, I could see the wet spot near her eyes, where tears had been wiped. The flashlight stayed aimed towards me the entire time. My stupid friends, they dared me to go into this old house. I thought I could show 'em up, but I forced air out of my mouth, around my closed teeth. I looked around awkwardly before offering a hand and introducing myself. She accepted it and shook back softly. It's Amanda. Amanda, so do you... Her eyes suddenly widened and she began flapping her flashlight on its handle. No. Don't go out. Don't go out. Not now. The threads began to overlap. I looked at the ground. The shadow was fading and returning in rapid succession until it finally faded and left Amanda sniffing. I was about to ask what the deal was with the flashlight, but instead paused as she reached down into the air with her hands. Can you hold my hand, please? The smarter part of me was screaming to run. This wasn't my problem. I'd already stopped her from getting run over. With reluctance, I slowly held her by the wrist, which led her to hurry up beside me. She was gazing around with a great anxiety, and the new idea of her being a kidnap victim started to surface. Listen, is there a rundown house around here, like really close by? I scrunched my face and turned around to point. The house, whose lawn I'd been letting my fingers run through just before all the strangeness. Yeah, there's one literally right there. Amanda's eyes lit up. Please, can you lead me to it? Don't let go. Just take me to the house. I can't see it from here. So she was just blind. Still, don't you have someone you want me to call? Maybe a caretaker or, I don't know, a doctor or something? Amanda's eyes nearly found mine. She only reached my nose, but she gave me a very confused look. I don't know how you're doing it, but I literally can't see my own hand in front of my face. It's way too dark. She demonstrated as such, waving 5 digits between us. Too dark? Not wanting to argue anymore, and deciding that this condemned building was at least better than the middle of the street, I obliged. Placing my hand on her shoulder, I slowly led Amanda to the sidewalk, assuming she couldn't see it either. I warned her near the edge, and she was quick to step up, thanking me. Onward we went, shuffling down the cracked stone path to the front door. At some point, she must have found her bearings and stepped forward on her own, hands sliding around until it found the door. Without hesitation, Amanda's hand threw itself for the knob, and on contact she gripped it with all her might and thrust the door open, which, to my great surprise, was not locked. She hurried inside the dimly lit hallway and began nervously laughing, shaking her arms out to let off energy, or so I assumed. Standing in the doorway, I bit my lower lip and scratched my head. So, you all good now, or... Amanda turned towards me, finally meeting my eyes, and sniffed before gingerly coming back. Actually, thank you for literally everything, but could I trouble you for one more thing? What's that? Will you come with me to see my friends? Just as proof that there's another way inside. They're literally waiting outside, just on the other side of the house. Just 2 seconds, that's all I'm asking. If her friends were really there, then they needed to be told that she needed a checkup. Or someone in her life that could actually do something. Fine, 2 seconds, then I'm gone. But I was keeping my guard up. Amanda laugh-cried again, nodding and pressing her palms together and lowering her head. I owe you everything. Come on, the door is right here. She pointed towards the end of the hall, where there seemed to be a door to the back patio. I followed along, watching corners from my peripheral vision, in case some goon boyfriend of hers tried to jump me. As I approached the door, Amanda threw it open and laughed again, a laugh of massive relief. I could only stare. I could see one concrete step before everything started to fade into the deepest, most pitch-black nothing I'd ever seen. Amanda waved into the darkness and took off sprinting, vanishing in an instant. There you are, a boy's voice called out from the dark. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My hands flurried on my phone, swiping to use my light feature. Still too hot. It wasn't powering up. I reached around, looking to see if Amanda had left her flashlight behind, when something poked out through my pocket. A basic ring light on my keys. Hey, come over here. What are you doing? Shaking my head, I turned it on. Barely visible. It only illuminated maybe 2 feet in front of me. Enough to catch a pair of legs speed-walking at me. I gasped as Amanda reappeared before me with a questioning gaze. You coming? How... Where did you go? Now you're being the weird one. No, stop it. How could you see out here? Amanda looked more puzzled and slowly started walking back into the dark. With my eyes, it's the middle of the day. Leaning my head outside, I glanced around. There was nothing that said midday to me. I could make out a few feet of house wall in either direction, and a path that led out to what looked like the edge of a sidewalk. But without leaving the doorway, I couldn't see any further. Amanda crossed her arms, seeming annoyed. Hey, come meet them. We got to prove it to them or they won't believe us. But I seriously can't. A boy approached beside me. He hopped up quickly to the same segment of stone Amanda was on. Can't what, outsider? You got to be kidding, Amy. I'm not, and you weren't there. It was awful. She gave the boy a decent shove, nearly sending him to the ground. This seemed to annoy him because his next decision was to snatch the keys from my distracted hand and run off into the dark. Come on, come get him. Anthony, Amanda yelled. I impulsively leapt off the porch and straight forward, where I saw the jingling light. As the light spun around and around, it illuminated at least 3 more faces, all laughing at Anthony acting like an idiot. I nearly tripped on the curve as I stepped off the sidewalk, and the last bit of light I saw was the ring light being shown in my face. Then total darkness. He'd pocketed the keys. Give those back, I shouted, trying not to let it show that the dark was beginning to creep me out. In response, I heard the guy's quiet, shuffling footsteps as he went around me. I made a grab anyway, but each time I only ended up with air. Guys, knock it off, Amanda screamed. You're such assholes. First you make me go in there, and now... I lost focus on Amanda's voice as I received a shove from behind suddenly. I stumbled forward and my heart plummeted to the depths of my stomach. This is where it's going. Yeah, John, hell yeah, Anthony's voice sounded off to my right. I gritted my teeth and swung a fist in that direction. It missed, but was answered with a very hard punch in the shoulder. Tripping over my own feet, I fell down, hitting the ground hard as I couldn't tell where I was. As my wrist throbbed, I looked straight forward. Nothing, pitch black, not even a chance of a beam of sunlight or a twinkling of star. What happened to the sun? I muttered, sweat rolling down my cheek. Anthony, and who I presumed was John, started laughing. Another voice spoke up. Hey, Anthony, enough, man. You're just beating up on... Shut up, or maybe you can go home and cry to your mama, huh? The dissenting voice did not sound again. I could hear Amanda gasp, Oh God, it's the same for you over here. I tried to get back up, but every time I pushed off my knees to stand, Someone's hand struck me from a different angle and threw me off balance. A hand on my chest, 2 palms under my ribs, fingers dancing across my face, poking me in the eye, my toes being stomped upon by invisible boots, a punch to the gut, when the slapping was getting boring from then. And none of it was visible. I tried to run. They pushed me back or yanked my arms or tripped me onto the pavement. No sign of the house, no shapes of the cruel strangers I'd encountered. Everywhere I looked, it was all the same. The dark struck out, and there was nothing I could do. "Hey!" Amanda was shouting from behind. I turned towards her voice, earning myself a kick in the calf. "Can you see my flashlight? The house is over here." There was nothing. I told her as much. "Damn it, I'm coming." Footsteps slapped against the pavement. I heard a female grunt, flesh hitting flesh, and Anthony cried out as he fell to the ground. "Ow, Amy, what the hell?" Keys jingling, hitting the road right in front of me. I just slapped my hand forward to where I heard the sound and patted around while I heard Amanda tussling with Anthony. My pinky finger grazed a bit of metal. A silicone button sat beneath my thumb. I hit it and spun around, seeing my other attacker, John, having to wind down another punch he was preparing to throw. My hands extended naturally. As he fell forward in surprise, I pushed him to the pavement before flashing the light around more. There were 2 other boys just standing around kicking rocks, avoiding eye contact. Then there was Amanda, being thrown back by Anthony, who turned towards me and pointed. "John, let's get him." I don't know where I went after that. I just ran. Amanda was calling my name, and I could hear Anthony shouting at her to get off of him, but John was still hot on my heels. When my toe blasted into a curve that I couldn't see, I fell forward on the sidewalk, only for him to catch my ankle. I kicked back without looking, and felt the heel of my shoe push on something soft. With John howling in pain, I painfully picked myself up and kept moving. Anthony's voice rang out. "Come on, we were just messing with you. Don't be such a bitch about it." A hard shoulder bump into the side of a house, a shin into a lawn ornament. I only learned I was hurting myself after hitting them and giving them a quick spotlight with my ring light. Just as I spotted the perfect hiding spot, the ring light began to flicker. Their voices grew closer. I dropped to the ground and crawled straight forward. My ring light grew dim, then it burned out. It was only a cheap little thing after all. I hurried through the grass, the left side of my face being scraped by the branches of a bush that I thought I had avoided. The voices were still approaching. My hand hit the old wooden wall of an open shed, and feeling around, I found the open hole that was the entrance before scrambling inside and holding my breath. 2 sets of footsteps, followed by John and Anthony bickering. I dared not let out a puff of air. I didn't even blink, regardless of being blind in this dark, out of the fear that they'd hear the smacking of my lids. Eventually, luckily, they left. I didn't dare come out, not for at least half an hour, or so it felt like. When I finally built up the courage to act, I slowly reached for the last of my light. I powered on my phone, only for it to die again right away. Despite it being eternally night, it was still hot as hell out here, but that phone was my only lifeline. I powered it on and off repeatedly. I was able to make out a vague path before me that way, and slowly made my way back to the road before it stopped turning on at all. It was much too open to walk. As I tried, I was liable to walk in circles with nothing to touch to guide myself there. And at any moment, if it was the same as it had been for Amanda, there was a chance a car wouldn't see me coming and just roll right over the top of me. I had to crawl, and with haste. My hands and knees burned against the umbral floor, and I wandered towards where my memories told me the house's back door was. My heart pounded against my sweat-laden t-shirt, but I was determined to find my fingers slammed into the curve. I hurried onto the sidewalk, keeping one hand along the curve. I felt something sticky and smelly squish under my palm, and I had to call upon every ounce of willpower not to stop and vomit right there from the smell of fecal matter. I just pressed on, feeling out on my right side by where the lawn stopped and the stone pathway began. Hands clamped onto my shoulders and I froze. They had found me. I felt wind against my ear, the breath of one of those kids. A whisper escaped, and my heart bungee jumped with despair. Once I understood the words, I stood and let the hands turn me around before pushing me back the way I had came. A few moments later, I was being guided up the stony steps, and the door out was before me. Amanda slowly pulled it open, trying not to make a sound that would attract the others. I'm sorry for all of this. I just ran inside and through the house, staying as silent as the night should be. Several days had passed, but that starless place still remains anchored in the back of my unconscious mind. At first, it wasn't out of interest, only fear. That day I first encountered it, I'd sprinted all the way home without pausing, barreling through the front door and barricading myself in my bedroom. There was no way in hell Anthony or John knew where I lived, let alone where I was on this side. But the fear lingered. The image of them wandering out of the house into the daylight, flashlights and clubs in hand, was a nightmare that repeated for the next week. That, or just vague ideas that ended in me drowning in the dark. I was so concerned that I'd wake back up on that unseeable pavement that I'd swallowed my pride and plugged in an old nightlight. Mom wasn't entirely impressed. She didn't really seem to buy the excuse that I was just trying it out for old time's sake. Nor did she entirely believe that I had slipped and fallen down the edge of Norcrook Creek as an explanation for the bruises. I think she was mostly on the edge, in the general sense, though. Parents are scared of their babies being nabbed on the sidewalk in the scary modern age. Despite my reminding her that I was a very capable 18-year-old who wasn't going to enter someone's van because they had a puppy, it wasn't that particular idea that kept me from going out to Kenneth's for Halo night. Sure, we could have played online for convenience, but you haven't truly lived until you've played couch co-op with greasy pizza and good friends. Mom probably thought I was actually doing her a service this once and being cautious, but in reality, I couldn't stand the thought of walking in the dark between the street lamps. Now, Kenneth was nothing if not determined. So, when he DM'd me that we'd have to call it off because my mom was worried about me going out, his natural response was to show up an hour later with console in hand. I couldn't help laughing, and my mom didn't mind at all, so up and away to my room we went. Pizza came about 30 minutes later, so we decided to take an early food break after a rough start to the night, going a whole 0 and 3. Once Mom had taken her slice and left the room, Kenneth turned to me and pointed. So, was it Bobby? Your eye. Did Bobby Royce get you? My gaze fell, trying to think of what to say. Should I try to tell Ken the truth? It's not like I didn't trust him, but would he believe the ridiculousness that would fly from my mouth if I did? Could I go with the falling in the creek story again? If my mom didn't believe it, though, then there was no chance that he would. I had no better lie to tell. The truth it was, it seemed. I laid it all out. The girl standing in the street with a flashlight, the old house that led to some other place, one of pure darkness, the beating from the other kids, and my escape. The nervous energy I'd been hiding from my parents finally started to come out as I whispered my tale, taking form in jittery fingers and shaky voice. Maybe those tiny details in my mannerisms were the reason that Ken looked so enthralled, why he appeared to believe me so quickly. And when I was done, that's probably why he threw an arm over my shoulder and gave me a quick brotherly squeeze. Man, I'm glad you're all right, though. Wait, that's it? You just accept everything I say? Are you lying? I mean, no. Then I'm glad you're all right. Nothing's changed. Relief flooded over and out of me, leaving in the form of a deep exhale. External belief in this crazy situation made me feel substantially less crazy, so I picked up a controller and joined in on the next match that Ken had started. Veto the current maps because they're both completely terrible, and I would like to see this place, though. Dread set back in right away. What? No. Look, I do believe you, but I just want to be certain. If it's just a dark place and nothing else, then we dip our heads in and out, and that's it. No way. 2 seconds. I'm not going back. I had to watch my volume, getting dangerously close to being loud enough for other people in the house to hear. Ken groaned. Then just tell me where the house is, and I'll go on my own. I just want to see it. I'm not going grocery shopping there. Which old house is it? The one on Farview? Nothing. I'll find it by myself, Bruce. 11th Street. Thank you, but you're not going alone. Ken stopped firing the Warthog's turrets and looked at me. I just kept focusing on driving as I bit my lip. You don't go there alone, period. 2-second peek. Got it? Yeah, absolutely. All right, good. Ken smiled and lightly punched my shoulder. Hey, get shooting. They're taking the point. So that's how I wound up back outside that house the very next afternoon, building up the courage to go inside. The plastic grip on my flashlight was picking up enough stress to make diamonds from carbon. Ken's stomach grumbled. He had skipped lunch in anticipation of this moment. This is the one? Yeah, they still haven't cut the grass. Well, let's get it over with then. Ken patted my shoulder, then proceeded towards the front door. I'm not alone this time, I kept telling myself. That was my only saving grace. If those thugs were somehow waiting for us, I knew Ken would fight tooth and nail, quite literally, to keep us safe. Like I said, determined. Just like the whole reason we were here in the first place. The door opened with little issue for Ken, only sticking a little as it dragged against the lip of the step. He stood back and gestured inside, prompting a gulp from me. Flicking the flashlight on my trembling thumb, I trudged through the doorway, fighting my feet's overwhelming urge to stop moving. I could hear Ken follow and close the door behind us, but I kept my gaze fixed on the door on the other side of the house, past the entry hall and the stairs, through the hallway, into the kitchen, where the back door sat. Now that I had a moment to look around, dim was the exact word to describe the lighting in the house. Everywhere I looked, there was a faint degree of brightness, scattered across the peeling paint and the splintered floorboards. No shadow was too deep, no sunbeams peeking through the drawn shades. Everything was neutrally lit, and the few shadows that existed were soft around the edges, blending into the lit space with ease. It was a place of true liminality between the day and the night. So it's on the other side of this door? Ken asked as we reached the kitchen. Yeah, right through there. I grabbed his sleeve and tried to step forward. Just looking. 2 seconds. We're not exploring. Ken smiled. Yeah, I already said so. Now come on. He placed his hand on the doorknob and slowly began to turn it. When it reached the end of its rotation, Ken faced me and nodded. Let's see it. My fingers gripped the kitchen counter as I stared into the abyss once more. My nails scratched its surface. My heart rate rose, and my breathing grew quick. Seeing that same barely lit porch step, that path into the night, I expected to see Anthony stride towards us and immediately start beating us senseless. Those demons, dragging us back into the dark, refusing to let us go home. Hey, you weren't kidding. Ken finally spoke. He was in just as much awe as I had been the first time. Yeah, man. He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, then scrolling through them to make sure what he was seeing was real. His brow furrowed, and after a few more swipes, the flashlight feature was active. Turning to me, the light was pointed right in my face. Does this actually do anything, or... yes, Ken, not my eyes, man. Oh, sorry. Ken quickly swung the light back outside, and after the colored spots had faded, I could see the green grass outside being highlighted. But the light did not travel far. It was as though the darkness in this place was swallowing it whole. Instead of pitch black, merely being a descriptor, it appeared to be literal, the dark of night actively absorbing the light of Ken's smartphone. Ken's eyes widened when he seemed to notice this too. Doesn't go very far, huh? Maybe if we had a real industrial flashlight or something. I don't know. Or the moon. That would light things up. Nah, no moon either. It's daytime for them too, remember? What? You're kidding me. Nah, seriously. Look up. I came up to the door, and with both hands tightly gripping the frame, I turned around and leaned backwards, sticking my head out into that realm. Ken followed suit, and we both observed the pure emptiness of the sky above. Vast nothingness, not a star in place or a moon in orbit. Had there been no sense of gravity to indicate that we were looking upward, I would have just as easily believed that we were staring into an unfathomably large hole in the earth. And yet, the temperature reminded us that it wasn't true night. If the times were shared on each side, then it was mid-afternoon, and we could feel it in the warmth radiating from, well, somewhere. Being the middle of summer, we each could feel the heat of the sun falling down on our faces, beginning to scorch our skin and make sweat run along our hairlines, with not an ounce, not a twinkle of light to show its existence. 2 sacks of meat left in a slow cooker, alone to roast in darkness. Perhaps, I pondered, with an oxymoronic shiver, this was hell. We stood there, staring for some time, trying to take in the lack of anything, just as one might gawk at the everything of a clear night sky. We didn't speak. We didn't break our attention from the void to see how the other one was reacting. It was just us, the heat, and the quiet dark. All right, then, I'm convinced. I stood up and re-entered the kitchen, with Ken closing the door behind us and tucking his phone away. That's all? Ken gestured openly with both hands. No exploring, that's what we agreed, right? I mean, not gonna lie, I would like to come back sometime. Kenneth, but I promise we're done for now, just like we said. I'll prep some stuff for another time, and if you want to join me, you can. I'm not gonna pressure you. I let out a deep breath, a mixture of relief and mild concern. Hey, look, if you're coming back, you shouldn't do it alone. You know, those other guys, I don't want them doing the same thing to you. Well, no offense, but they didn't show up this time, did they? No. Ken wrapped an arm around my shoulder and grinned, starting to walk out. See, they're just people. You got unlucky and met some bad ones, just like on our side. But that doesn't mean they're gonna gang stalk this house, waiting to jump on you specifically. If it's just a normal world like ours, minus the whole, endless dark thing, we can start wandering out into that over time. Who knows, maybe we'll meet some other people. Good ones. Amanda's face flashed in my mind as he said that, and staring into that dark, without getting the crap kicked out of me, it had been relaxing in a way. Seeing that light's area of effect be so reduced had sparked my curiosity, and the uncomfortable feeling of warmth from their daylight, while my brain was trying to tell me it was night. This paradoxically tactile experience would not leave my mind. It was the same gnawing desire to understand that had led me to help Amanda in the first place. And Ken was there, would be there, with me, no longer alone at the mercy of thugs. By the time we had reached the sidewalk, back on our side, I'd come to a decision. Yeah, I think I'm down, I said, trying to shout over a passing pickup truck with a broken muffler. What? I just smirked and gave him 2 thumbs up instead. Ken responded in kind, bumping fists with mine. Thus began our amateur ventures into the world without light. The next weekend, I fished around in the cupboard and closet to find the strongest flashlight we owned before heading over to the house. It was pouring down rain, and upon arriving, the door opened onto its own, a soaking wet Ken welcoming me inside. The first test was to simply try out more sources of light, while not traveling too far from the house. The aforementioned rain turned out to be important, as we were quick to learn something upon entering the other side. Weather did not align either. In fact, Ken dressed down and threw his coat onto the dark side dry porch, while I fiddled between the different lights we'd found. By the time I had tried them all, and observed that all lights worked in terms of illuminated spaces for us to see, though with decreased efficiency, Ken was ready to head back with completely dry clothes, which only got soaked again the instant we set foot on our side. After a few more ventures and feeling confident about our current knowledge of light sources, it was time. For the next excursion, we brought markers, a notepad, assorted chalk, and a flashlight with the biggest lumen count on the box we could afford. We were about to start mapping out the new world. Walking out onto the sidewalk wasn't too harrowing. The flashlights worked well enough, and I'd already been out that far before. It was anything beyond the curve, or past the length of the lawn, that made me swallow back my fears. Staring down, where John had shoved me into the bully circle, I scrawled a red X on the sidewalk, back and forth several times, making sure it was very clear that this was the footpath back home, in case we got lost. Ken and I always made sure to stay within earshot of one another. I stayed crouched and drew my chalk lines along the pavement, making sure to add little arrows pointing back to the house occasionally. When I reached the corner, I paused and pulled out the flashlight to see the layout, a four-way stop. I relayed the information to Ken, who would mark it down. Slowly, we started filling out the block. On our fifth trip together, we managed to map out the entire block that the house was situated on. But we were still too scared to try crossing the street. Car quickly became the most common call-out. Hearing a car coming was no problem. We could hear the revving engines approach, the sputtering of rickety junkers clambering by. But still, even when I knew it was coming, I'd still back away from the road or crouch low and feel that mysterious gust of air as something flew by. Sometimes I'd raise my flashlight to see the car stopped right next to me, the ghastly illuminated face of its occupant scrutinizing me for waving such things around. Other times we'd hear one pass on the other side of the road and quickly swing a light source at it, only to catch the edge details as it sped by. Back into the darkness, it never failed to give me the worst goosebumps. Only one thing came from experiencing these nightly contraptions: the truth of learning that any form of light, natural or artificial, coming from this realm was invisible to us. Hence, headlights did not show up, only adding to my desire for caution. But it was another big discovery, overall. Eventually, though, Ken wanted to explore further. Sometimes there was a pungent odor that wafted our way, and he was determined to find the source. Were we near a landfill? The dumpster of a restaurant with unique food to this world? I was still nervous about the vehicles, but Ken said he would cross with me. Once we were both satisfied that no cars were coming from any direction, we set forth. Together, each watching a different direction, we sidestepped across the road, back to back. I was so focused on getting across safely, my ankle met the curb and stayed there while my body tried and failed to keep walking. Falling over, I took Ken down with me, and we both hit the asphalt in an instant. Ah, what the hell, man? Sorry. My ankle. I rolled onto my butt and pulled my right leg in, hands covering my injured ankle. Oh, no. Oh, shit. Ken pulled out his backpack and scavenged around. We had some basic medical supplies, to the effect of bandage wraps and some ibuprofen alcohol. Certainly no splints or crutches, and definitely no ice in the summer heat. The combined warmth of the air, the searing pain of my lower extremities, and the limited light, as Ken tried to fix me up, made me go dizzy. Hey, water? I asked. He immediately supplied me with a fresh bottle. Cracking the lid, I downed a sizable gulp, nearly choking, before painfully pulling back my sock and running it over the ankle. Better than nothing. Can you stand? I tried putting some weight on it. Instant regret. Ken groaned. All right, we need to go home then. Let's get back across the street. Beep, whoop. A sudden, single blaring of that unknown siren threw both of us into a panic. Neither of us could pretend that the sound sent us screaming and possibly peeing our pants. The heavy roll of rubber on the cement crept closer in the dark. As we breathed heavily, waving the flashlight towards the source, our hearts sank once we realized what it was. You all right there, boys? The police officer asked, a darkly figure against the diminishing lowered beam of Ken's flashlight. Saw you take a tumble there. Neither of us were quick to answer. Ken was trying to act natural, and thus was avoiding just holding the flashlight straight up at the officer. This left most of him in shadow, a voice of authority coming from the emptiness. "Yeah, we're okay. My friend twisted his ankle, but I think he's all right." "Yeah," I couldn't help myself. "You scared the hell out of me with that siren." The officer laughed. "Well, I'm just glad you're all right. Besides the ankle, can you walk?" Ken scrambled to get the backpack on and tried to lift me up, taking my right arm across his shoulder. I winced at the pain, but nodded. "Yeah, enough to get home." His pause sent sweat pouring down my temples. "You guys want a lift to the hospital? Just down the road, after all." Heart skipping, I did everything I could not to let my face contort into shock, hoping desperately that he'd think I was just cringing from the pain. I side-eyed Ken, and he followed suit. "I'd feel bad if I just left you alone. Come on, hop in the back. I'll take you over." We heard the click of the doors unlocking, and we had little time to excuse or refuse. But Ken threw out one last Hail Mary. No, it's all right. His house is just around the block. I'm sure we can make it back." "I don't know. He doesn't look like he can walk right now. I really think you should get it checked out." We couldn't make out his face fully, but we could hear the growing suspicion in his voice. The churning engine was the only song of the night for a moment before I finally sighed. "Let's just go, Ken." I was certain Ken was not happy about the situation, but the last thing we needed was the police prying into us. He was likely one step away from asking for IDs or inquiring in general, and there was no way that we'd be able to feasibly explain the entire alternate universe thing without ending up in the loony bin. And even if he did believe us, was it a good idea to start sharing things like that so boldly? No. The frightening path, the one that took us away from our only escape in a direction and distance untold, was the better way for now. The flashlights turned off. I tensed. Helping lift me back up, Ken grunted as he flailed his free arm towards the car. Once I heard his palm slap against the side, it only took a moment before the door handle was found, opened, and we were both situated onto the hard plastic seat. No sooner than that we were buckled in, and the officer reversed a bit before turning left. If you've ever been in a cab and the driver takes a route you're not familiar with, there's an uneasiness that comes with it. A cab driver who is clearly getting you lost and you don't know where you're going to end up is the most gut-wrenching. Now try to imagine that feeling, except you can't even see out the windows. No landmarks to find your way home, only endless black stretching on forever and ever. Truly getting lost in an abyss. "So, do you need to contact your parents or anything?" The situation just kept getting worse. My guts twisted as I glanced at Ken. My eyes were partially adjusted to the dark, only very minimally, before being blinded as the flashlight clicked on. I froze for a moment before recalling our test. There was no reason the cop would be able to see the beam. To him, it would just be a weird shadow. And that's if he was even paying attention. Notepad in lap, Ken was deep in conversation, greatly simplifying his marker movements to singular straight lines. He was trying to make an approximate map back to the house, based on the turns the car took. Quick thinking on his part, but it was clear it was taking all of his focus to stay accurate, so that left me to engage with the officer. Nah, mine are out of town on vacation, and his mom doesn't get off work till 6, so she's not going to pick us up. I'll send her a text when we get to the hospital." "Oh, you're staying with him?" Yeah, just hanging out and stuff. Playing Halo," Ken said suddenly, but quieted. "Yeah, playing Halo," I repeated. "Ah, good stuff. Which one?" 3, sometimes CE, we play MCC. The cop chuckled again. "Nah, Halo 2 is where it's at." I had no response. I was still too frightened by all the noises surrounding us, despite not seeing a thing. There was definitely traffic surrounding us now, meaning we were out of the suburbs. The distance had greatened, and the knot in my stomach was wringing out bile, splashing towards my throat. The pain radiated from my ankle, but it was fading. I barely noticed it in my mind as it was going 100 different directions. How could we find the house again? What would the hospital do? Would they demand to see my parents before they let me go? If I told the truth, they'd certainly keep me for a psych eval. What if... The cruiser jolted to a stop. The 2 minutes that we'd spent traveling had felt like an eternity, but it was over. All right, here we are. Ken opened the door and hopped out. A moment later, I felt the door on my side crack open, and his arm helping me out. He kept the flashlight low, but enough to see and acknowledge the officer. Hey, thanks for the lift, we appreciate it. The cop nodded once and shifted out of park. No problem. Next time, though, stick to playing on the sidewalk instead of the crosswalk, all right? Sure thing, thanks, I managed to reply. With that, the officer pulled away, and Ken helped me up onto the new curb. He handed me the flashlight so that he could try carrying me better, while I lit the way inside the hospital. Both of us were jumpy as people came in and out of our vision with startling frequency, staring at us with befuddlement riddling their faces. We managed to get sat down, and Ken took the flashlight from my hand. I'm going to go find the front desk and let them know. Maybe we can just get some ice for you, he whispered. I'll be right back. Swallowing, I wished him well, then watched as he curiously scanned around in the dark for the line of people, or a sign encounter, or anything. He was trying hard to be casual with the light, but I could still see people watching him. Eventually, he found the line and slowly progressed towards the desk. Watching that illuminated spot across the room was all I could do, as I tried not to be overwhelmed with my unseeable surroundings. Without sight, sounds washed over me. The shrill beeping of an EKG machine, the endless collection of mumbles of countless patients and relatives worrying about their sinuses, the dings for the next in line, please, booming over the intercom. Phlegm-riddled coughing erupted from behind me. As I was reeling, my tactile senses were assaulted on the left, a jacket sleeve running along my forearm, from another patient suddenly taking the seat next to mine. For a moment, I squeezed my eyes shut. At least, that was a darkness of my own willingness. There, I had some peace, but the anxious part of my brain was telling me to act normal. Opening them and going from black to black was a dizzying experience. Eventually, the doctor called for us, and Ken once more helped me into the examination room. Though the pain had receded somewhat, the doctor's hands blindly turning it over brought out a few more grunts of discomfort. He confirmed what we thought, it was just twisted, and he wanted to put some ice on it, which was graciously supplied. He also gave me a crutch to get around easier, and wished us a good day before moving on. He never once asked about Ken's flashlight, and we just took it as a blessing. Leaving the building, we followed a footpath beside the hospital. We both collapsed onto the first empty bench we found, finally getting used to being caught in the dark. We heard no one on the swings or the seesaw creaking and smacking onto the ground. No middle-aged women gossiping over coffee. The only sounds of the world wandered to and fro behind us at a comfortable distance. The heat of the afternoon still wore on us, and now, having a chance to be left alone together, we could quietly sob and let out our woes. The dark was the only one to truly hear us. Collecting ourselves after that cathartic release, Ken opened his notebook and examined the map he had made. Okay, the door is on Maple. Yeah, closest to the corner of Maple and Turnbottom. Yeah, Maple and Turnbottom. Ken bit his lip and looked at me before shining the flashlight at my foot. Okay, I can't feasibly find the path and carry you back at the same time. My heart crumbled at the insinuation. No, Ken, please. I've got to figure out the way back. I'm going to chalk mark the way, then come back. The police ride only took like 2 minutes. The walk can't take more than 20. I didn't want him to go off alone. Bruce, our parents are waiting. We have to go back. I know. Hey, you still have your phone, right? Ken reached into his pocket and plucked out his own, slapping it into my hand. Now you got 2 light sources. Flashlight's still good. I'll be back before you know it. That was the last thing Ken said before taking off. I watched the light slowly wander off into the dark before it finally vanished. I turned back and sighed, pulling out my phone to offer myself some comfort for the coming wait. There was no connection here, so I found myself scrolling through photos and playing with puzzle games I downloaded eons ago. Still, the senses were overloaded. Honk! An angry driver blaring the horn at someone, likely in a hurry to get their loved ones inside the hospital. The chirping of birds far overhead, the scorching metal of the bench beginning to burn me through my jeans. I eventually had to take the crutch and stand for a moment, just to cool down. That's when I saw it. The light. Straight ahead, about 50 yards away, there was a light. Not in the direction that Ken had gone, but just past the edge of the tree line. An orange, flickering brilliance. Flame. All other concerns left my mind. Curiosity had taken hold once again. The other world's incessant noises faded as I was drawn slowly across the park, towards the dirt path that led into the woods. My phone battery was strong, and its own light function was enough to follow the road. I had to see this light. I had to know how it was possible. Was fire an exception to the rule? That... had it just manifested there? How was I seeing this? Trudging through a small bush, the path just behind me, I reached the small clearing that the fire was set in. Yes, it was indeed a fire. I watched it crackle and snap and took in the aroma. Meat. Putrid. The very same essence that Ken and I had noticed near the house. I twinged in my gut. I looked at the fire's base and saw the reason. Nearly choking on my own saliva, then almost vomit. I covered my mouth, ready to scream when, "Hey, who's there?" Every muscle turned to stone. My eyes wandered back upwards to find a stout, portly man standing on the opposite side of the inferno. He was looking directly at me, but his eyes were squinted. He couldn't make me out properly, but I could clearly see the shovel in his hand, clicking against the flashlight that dangled from his hip. How foolish of us to assume no one else had discovered the way over, or even a different doorway, a perfect way to hide one's crimes, disposal in a completely different world, one where the person could never be tracked down to their origins, and have completely vanished from the original. Evidence easily destroyed in a manner less than noticeable to the people of this realm, and now I was face to face with the monster behind those acts. A familiar, broken muffler came roaring up in the dark beyond me, a single headlight beam briefly cutting through the trees before turning and turning off. Two monsters. The man tilted his head slightly, taking a step around the fire. I was out of time. I had to give him the exact answer that would not lead to my own body being added to the funeral pyre, to avoid the fate of that child. "What's with that hole?" I lied. The man stopped his advance before quickly gazing between the burning corpse and myself. "Eh?" I pointed forward. "That weird shadow on the ground. What's up with that?" My only hope of survival was convincing this man that I was of this world, not his. Our own. Someone who, if missing, would raise attention on this side. Rivers of sweat sprinted down my neck. The man looked back at the bonfire and chuckled. "Oh, yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it?" "What's that, Travis?" A taller, more gangly man approached, two video cameras in hand. When he noticed me, his entire form froze. The lighting from below made it gnarled, unshaven face look even more horrific. "Who's the kid?" "I don't know, some local," Travis replied. He took a closer look, watching me before gesturing to the fire. "Yep, that's why we're here. We saw this the other day and figured there might be some critters in there. So we're taking a look." I swallowed cautiously and wiped my forehead. Yeah, just a weird shadow, don't you think?" Heart beating a million times a second, throbbing in my ears. The taller man seemed to ease up and raise the camera with a half-toothed grin. "Well, that's what these are for. I wanted to record the whole ordeal." His half-truth did not go unnoticed, and my stomach did a barrel roll. The smell was not helping either. both of the stench of the murder to my left and the fat, budding char of the crispy child at my feet. Travis slapped a hand on my shoulder, hard. It took every ounce of my willpower not to cry out, or not to produce my lunch across the grass. "Well, you'd best be on your way. You don't want whatever's in there to jump out and get you, right?" His fingers tightened on my shoulder. I couldn't respond. I was transfixed on the body, watching a shoulder joint crumble and a whole arm collapse into the charcoal beneath. "Right?" he urged. "Bruce." Ken's voice broke me from my trance. I hobbled forward, shoving my shoulder out of Travis's meat hook. "Yeah, sorry. My friend's calling. Good luck with your hunting." Both men just slowly nodded towards me, and I pushed the crutch harder than ever. I saw the edge of the light pass my body and illuminate a piece of the path ahead of me. Looking over my shoulder, Travis had his own light out, seeing me off. Despite the burning in my retinas, I refused to noticeably squint and waved quickly before hurrying back down the path and calling to Ken. Rushing towards the light, I quickly wrapped my arms around his shoulder and pushed us both towards the path. "We need to go now." "What? I mean, yeah, I figured out the way back, but what?" "We aren't the only ones," was all I had to say. No other words were exchanged until we were back at the house. Every moment, Ken was focused on getting us there. The red chalk was our saving grace, but intersections required us to wait for either audio cues or for other people crossing at the same time to know if we were truly safe. As I hobbled along, I listened desperately for the sound of that gravelly muffler, fearing its approach. Luckily, no such time came. Within 15 minutes, we had found the house and nearly tripped over each other trying to get inside, slamming the door and locking it, tears spilling on the age-rotted floor. We were home. We were safe. Ken and I both agreed we were done exploring the starless world for the foreseeable future, and after I had described what I had encountered on the edge of the park, we were both on lookout for that truck. Travis had gotten close enough, seen enough of me, that there was a reasonable fear of him searching for me on this side. But the truck never appeared. No Travis. No lanky man. Nothing. Still, that dark I controlled, the one behind closed eyelids, had been forever tarnished. Every night henceforth, when I shut my eyes to sleep, I saw that kid burning away, clear as day, watching the child turn to ash, and the smell. God, the memory of that smell. It was an image so perfectly and literally burned into the inky void that it was impossible to forget any detail of it. I was waiting at a bus stop one day, reliving that moment again in that empty moment of patience. Breaking from the memory, I rubbed away any trace of moisture from my eyes, returning to the warm, sunny afternoon day. Breathing in, I inhaled the scent of scalding asphalt and dirt exhaust, and heard the rumbling of a rust box I'd been dreading. From the corner of my eye, I saw the dirty brown pickup. Inside the cabin were two men, a tall one at the wheel and a stout one in the passenger seat. The passenger turned slowly to face me, and I couldn't help gazing back. His eyes tried to pierce me, but failed. I was frightened for certain, but I also felt a spark of doubt. I think he did too. At least I hope he did. He never spoke, just watched me with a puzzled look as the truck took off, as if trying to place a face he'd only seen once before, half illuminated by the flame in the darkest of voids.